Chapter 774. As the owner of the pavilion, she shouldered the heavy responsibility of the Pavilion of Consonance. This heavenly immortal was definitely not an ordinary person. Her expression changed. "You brought about your own destruction." She looked at Zhang Xiu with contempt. He actually dared to challenge an immortal king. How foolish! Zhang Xiu said, "Oh, is that so?" Instead of retreating, she walked towards Zhang Xiu. "From the moment you took out the great golden pill and declared that you wanted to learn the consonant's heavenly illumination, I'm afraid that you've been targeting the Pavilion of Consonance from the start. What are you planning?" Zhang Xiu said, "What, now you admit that you're a member of the Pavilion of Consonance?" Her voice turned cold, and she said resolutely, "Those who spy on the Pavilion of Consonance have ill intentions, according to the sect rules, will be killed without mercy. Those who cover up will have their entire clan punished." Looking at the kind and amiable face, now filled with killing intent, her eyes flashed. For a moment, the ancient courtyard fell silent. "So you're saying that you want to kill me?" she said. "Hand over the great golden pill, leave this place, and never enter again. Perhaps I will consider letting you live." Zhang Xiu said, "What if I don't agree?" "Then die here." She took out a white, shining disc. The strange patterns on the disc shone with many profound runes. Then, she chanted something and pointed it at Zhang Xiu. Zhang Xiu saw that there were two cyan wolf souls inside. Their eyes burst out with a terrifying ominous glint, rushing out from inside. The entire heaven and earth violently fluctuated. The originally dark sky became even more pitch black. There were no howls of wolves, but the full moon in the sky disappeared. Moon-devouring night wolf soul. This was a ferocious demon god from ancient times. It was said that they were extinct now. Who would have thought that two of them would appear, and they were even refined into soul weapons? When the two demon gods rushed out, Zhang Xiu realized that they were huge. They were even taller than the pavilion behind them, like a small mountain. When they rushed over, their aura was very shocking. The demonic soul refined within a soul armament was a very peculiar existence. It wasn't much different from a true beast in terms of strength, and it could even be stronger if it leaned towards the darkness element. However, as long as it wasn't a truly fatal soul, as long as it was killed by a spell, the soul armament's power could always be condensed again. In other words, it was extremely easy to kill. If it died, it could condense, and if it died, it could condense again. Therefore, the last time Zhang Xiu encountered such a situation, he directly destroyed both the soul and the soul armament. Once the soul armament was destroyed, the soul would naturally be unable to reform. When the twin wolf demons in the sky rushed over, Zhang Xiu's body rippled with ripple-like array patterns. Time and space seemed to be stretched infinitely, and the two demon gods seemed to have stopped in the air. Zhang Xiu walked forward slowly, not in a straight line, but in a strange arc. The demon god pressed its claws on Zhang Xiu's body. However, the demonic god's claws crumbled bit by bit, like a glass man slamming against a wall. The claws extended all the way to its forelimbs and then to its entire body. It was turned into ashes. Zhang Xiu had already walked out from inside. The female master opposite him opened her eyes wide in disbelief. How is this possible? If these two are demon gods, it doesn't make sense. How can this be? Zhang Xiu said, "How is it? Are you willing to take me to the Consonance Pavilion now?" Who are you? To be able to easily crush these two demon gods, even she, an immortal king, couldn't do it. But this person in front of her did it so easily. Immediately, the golden crown mark on her forehead flashed, and a golden light burst out. Zhang Xiu was actually quite shocked. As expected of the Consonance Pavilion, even a pavilion lord had such a treasure. Although these two demon gods couldn't be compared to the Yen Su Long, without 7 or 8 immortal kings, it was impossible to deal with them. Although the Consonance Pavilion was isolated from the rest of the world, its strength was truly terrifying. The golden light condensed into a thick pillar of light, and shot forward, directly towards Zhang Xiu. Zhang Xiu saw this technique and was slightly shocked. Wasn't this a secret technique of the Tai Hua sect? Zhang Xiu still remembered that the Tai Hua sect lord used a secret technique of the Consonance Pavilion. It was very likely that this was an exchange of techniques. The Consonance Pavilion was said to be omniscient. Almost all of the secret techniques passed down by the major sects were recorded in the Consonance Pavilion. In other words, the Consonance Pavilion had all of the secret techniques in the world. It was a bit of a boast, and Zhang Xiu didn't really believe it. But the Consonance Pavilion must have spent a lot of effort to exchange for secret techniques. After so many years, the number of secret techniques in their collection must be astronomical. Perhaps the secretary of the Qianqing school, the Consonance Pavilion's collection might be even more than the Qianqing school's. Zhang Xiu slowly raised his hand. He was actually using his bare hands to block the oncoming golden light. His opponent silently cursed Zhang Xiu for courting death. However, he would never have imagined that when the golden light collided with Zhang Xiu's hand, it would dissipate in all directions. Zhang Xiu remained completely unharmed. If Zhang Xiu was still a god king, he might have to muster up his spirit to fight against this person. But now that he was an entire realm higher than her, no matter how he played, he would be able to crush her. One had to know that even a mutated sword soul like Shui Wuyao had been caught by his fingers. The disparity was too great. Can you bring me to the Consonance Pavilion now? Zhang Xiu stared at the golden light as he walked towards the female master. He walked until he was a few meters away from her. The female master was already shocked to the extreme. This was the first time in her life that an immortal king had been suppressed like this. If this person wanted to kill her, he could do it with a flick of his finger. You. The golden light was extinguished. Zhang Xiu's sword finger was pressed against her snow-white throat. With his strength, he only needed to move slightly to separate this place. Cold sweat slid down her smooth face. Who are you? Zhang Xiu was clearly running out of patience. Bring me to the Consonance Pavilion. Not only can you save your life, but you can also give me the great golden pill. Otherwise, you can die here. There are plenty of people to bring me there. The female master's eyes flickered. Bringing Zhang Xiu to the sect was also a death sentence. Whoever exposed the location of the Consonance Pavilion would be guilty of the greatest crime. Just kill me. I won't bring you to the Consonance Pavilion. Zhang Xiu also knew that it wouldn't be so easy. If it was so easy, the location of the Consonance Pavilion would have been exposed long ago. He said, "You don't have to bring me there. Just tell me where it is." The female master said, "There is no direction there. If no one brings you there, you won't be able to find it." From these words, it could be seen that in order to save her life, she was willing to betray the Consonance Pavilion. However, she had no other choice. Since she was going to die either way, she might as well preserve her reputation. Zhang Xiu shook his head and said, "Even if you don't think for yourself, you should think for your family. I saw an 8-year-old child. If I'm not wrong, it should be your child?" It was not easy for an immortal king to have a child. The female master's expression changed greatly. "What do you want?" Zhang Xiu said, "I want to go to the Consonance Pavilion." The female master became very agitated. "Why do you want to go to the Consonance Pavilion? Who are you? Why must you go to the Consonance Pavilion? If you need a chance to ask questions, I can give it to you." The Consonance Pavilion claimed to be aloof from worldly affairs. She did not think that they would have any enmity with Zhang Xiu. "I only want to go to the Consonance Pavilion." Perhaps this female master could really give Zhang Xiu full access to the Consonance Pavilion. However, the Consonance Pavilion had almost violated its mission and almost caused his death. Zhang Xiu would not let this matter rest. Moreover, if the Consonance Pavilion knew that the problem was related to Zhang Luoxia, they might even lie to him. He had to go to the Consonance Pavilion. Betraying the sect will lead to the extermination of your entire family, including that 8-year-old child of yours. However, whether or not you tell me, your entire family will be exterminated. Think carefully. Zhang Xiu did not give people hope. Instead, he gave people a sense of struggle. As for whether or not he would struggle at death's door, he would live as long as he could. No one could say for sure. However, This was human nature. Survival was human nature. Even if he knew that he would not live long after drinking that drop of water, he would still drink that drop of water. Tell me, who are you? I can ask for instructions. Jiang Xiu thought to himself, trying to play tricks on me? Looking for reinforcements? You're courting death. He saw Jiang Xiu's figure transform, splitting into 6 figures. They suddenly accelerated, rushing in all directions like knives. A strong gust of wind rushed towards one of the houses, causing the house to collapse. A child was sleeping on the bed, completely unaware of what was happening. However, the sharp gust of wind was already close to his body. No, don't. Chapter 775. Rumble. A loud explosion resounded throughout the room. All the tables, vases, and bed frames were blown to smithereens. It was too fast and too fierce. Wah! The sleeping child was so scared that he started crying. The female master rushed over and hugged him. While the child was crying, she was so scared that her whole body was trembling. This time, the magical technique didn't land on him. However, it might not be the same next time, Jiang Xiu said in an ice-cold voice. His voice was filled with a chilling, killing intent. It was so gloomy that it made the female master shiver. You. The female master was trembling in fear. Facing such a person, everything was within his control. He could kill, plunder, and do whatever he wanted. Elder son, are you all right? A voice rang out from an extremely distant place, as if it came from ancient times. Jiang Xiu's attack just now had shattered the houses here, so he should have activated some kind of formation or restriction. Soon after, 2 voices could be heard. Soon, it felt as if they were thousands of miles away a moment ago, but in the next moment, they were right in front of him. 2 people landed. One had a stalwart figure, while the other was an old man. His figure was illusory and vague. After a while, his real body was revealed. Jiang Xiu faintly smiled. In order to save a person, the other party had used a camouflage technique. He let the illusory figure arrive first, and then his real body. Although it was only a short moment, it was enough to save a person's life. His method was quite brilliant. Impudent. You actually dare to be impudent in the heavenly tower. The stalwart man didn't say anything else. His sword shot out and a purple sword ray flashed. Soon after, it spun and turned into a purple sword wheel, producing an ear-piercing sound. Jiang Xiu glanced around. His gaze stopped on the sword wheel for a moment. The methods of the Consonance Pavilion seemed to be extremely brilliant. It even gave Jiang Xiu a feeling that they were on a higher level than the Age of Cash. The sword wheel flashed with purple light and arrived in front of Jiang Xiu. However, Jiang Xiu didn't panic at all. He was calm and composed. He softly said something to the sword wheel. Then, the sword wheel stopped in the sky. Its spinning speed also gradually slowed down until it completely stopped. Then, Jiang Xiu stretched out his finger and flicked it. Ding! As the voice rang out, it was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded from the inside. Countless white powder was emitted, and particles that looked like sand shot out in all directions like sharp swords. Don't be so arrogant. Another old man raised a black umbrella. When he opened it, the umbrella spun and fog rolled out. In an instant, it condensed into a black whirlpool the size of a loft. A huge amount of energy poured out from the whirlpool, trying to absorb the power of Jiang Xiu's explosion. Generally speaking, umbrella-type magical tools were very rare. However, those that existed were all heaven-defying existences. There was a red umbrella in the Qianxing school. Moreover, this kind of magical tool was mostly related to the soul. Strange. The old man was puzzled. Normally, people would fall down when they saw the black umbrella. The more powerful ones would feel dizzy even if they could hold on until the whirlpool appeared. However, Jiang Xiu was actually using magical techniques as if nothing had happened. Little did he know that the person opposite him didn't have a soul. Because he didn't have a soul, after Zhang Xiu became a divine emperor, no matter how much his divine body grew, a fourth supernatural power didn't appear. Zhang Xiu was sure that it had something to do with the soul. However, because he didn't have a soul, he couldn't awaken it. It was a pity, but also not a pity. Counterattack. He couldn't attack others, and others couldn't attack him either. What shocked him even more was that the explosive power of the finger was far more terrifying than he had imagined. When the chi rolled over, it actually covered the power emitted by the black umbrella. It was as if the sky was filled with 100% of the power. The people who came to carry the black umbrella and the sword were all sent flying. The power of a single finger was actually so strong. Who was this person? While flying through the air, they were unable to control their bodies. They flew for more than 50 meters and crashed into a house before coming to a stop. When the two of them got up from the ground, they were no longer as imposing as before. Their faces were pale, and there was still blood at the corner of the old man's mouth. There was actually a hole in the black umbrella that he was holding on to. When he saw the hole, he was dumbstruck. The magical umbrella was destroyed? Just this one finger, and it was against the sword wheel, had actually reached such a level of power. It was truly unimaginable. While he was shocked, his heart was bleeding. Who knew how long it would take to repair a damaged artifact, and how much it would cost? The person holding the Wheel of Swords was also shocked. There were many needle-like holes on the Wheel of Swords in his hand. At first glance, it didn't look like anything. However, when the moonlight shone on the sword, a line of words appeared. Of course, Zhang Xiu wouldn't write, "A night listening to the spring rain at the little pavilion." Instead, he wrote, "Useless chicken and pottery dog. Useless chicken and pottery dog." Seeing these 4 words, the person holding the Wheel of Swords trembled in anger. It was even more unbearable than the injuries in his body. Blood kept flowing out from the corner of his mouth. "Who are you? Why are you making things difficult for the heavenly tower?" The old man from before asked, "My heavenly tower has always been kind to others. We never make enemies." Zhang Xiu said, "The heavenly tower, or more accurately, the Consonance Pavilion." Hearing this, the two people opposite him were shocked. They didn't expect him to know that the Consonance Pavilion was behind the heavenly tower. From this, they could tell that Zhang Xiu had been studying the Consonance Pavilion for quite some time. Otherwise, no one would know about such a secretive person. "Why are you asking about my Consonance Pavilion?" At this point, there was no point in denying it. "My Consonance Pavilion has never made enemies. We only collect information and answer questions." The tall and sturdy man used his finger to guard his heavenly origin. The Wheel of Swords revolved around his tall and sturdy body like lightning, as if it had a mind of its own. Zhang Xiu said, "It's a pity that your esteemed sect has gone against the teachings of your ancestral founder and has formed a grudge with me. Since the original intention of the ancestral founder has been broken, the day of the Consonance Pavilion's destruction will come." Arrogant. Arrogant to the extreme. Was he threatening to destroy the Consonance Pavilion? Ridiculous. "Madman, who are you? How did my Consonance Pavilion make enemies with you?" Zhang Xiu's eyes were indifferent, carrying a cold glint. His aura suddenly soared. At this moment, heaven and earth submitted to him. "Since you've asked this, I'll let you know before you die. I am the sect master of Chenqing School, Zhang Luoxia. Zhang Luoxia." The 3 people were shocked at the same time. When Zhang Xiu designed the Consonance Pavilion in Qingling Mountain, the Consonance Pavilion had already deduced that Zhang Xiu was Zhang Luoxia. Later, it was confirmed that Zhang Xiu was indeed Zhang Luoxia. Moreover, he had changed from an immortal cultivator to a divine cultivator. He had eradicated the traitors in his sect and killed more than 10 immortal kings from the Tai Hua sect, Ji Dao sect, and other sections. No wonder his strength is so shocking. It turns out that he is the sect master of Chenqing School. The old man exclaimed, "Sect Master Zhang, my Consonance Pavilion shouldn't have offended you." Humph. Zhang Xiu snorted coldly. "You don't know, but the people in your upper echelons shouldn't deny that you wanted to kill me and even did something to kill me. If it weren't for my luck, I might have been killed by your consonance pavilion. So, die here." The man with the wheel of swords moved immediately, but he didn't realize that when Jiang Xiu's power pierced through the wheel of swords and left a mark on the artifact, a rune was also planted in his body. It was a rune for self-destruction. With a bang, his body suddenly lit up with a rune light because of his violent movements, and his whole body suddenly exploded. "Zhang Lu, how dare you kill the immortal kings of my consonance pavilion?" The old man shouted, but he was already several miles away. He ran faster than a monkey. Zhang Xiu had no intention of chasing after him. "Go back and tell your pavilion master that Zhang Xiu will pay a visit to the consonance pavilion in a few days to seek revenge for the assassination that year." When the female master saw that the situation was not right, she also flew away. However, she saw Zhang Xiu's figure flash, and as fast as lightning, he appeared in front of her. He stretched out his hand and grabbed her. "Do you want to leave? What you left behind for me and you is not done yet." The moment the female master was caught, she wailed in her heart. He was too strong, too fast. At this speed, he could kill her and then chase after the old man in a hurry. It seemed that he really did let the old man go on purpose to go back to the consonance pavilion to report. He let the old man go on purpose. The female master seemed to understand something. Chapter 776. The female master cursed inwardly. The old man didn't know that Zhang Xiu didn't know the location of the Lingxi Pavilion. If he escaped to the Lingxi Pavilion, the location would be exposed to Zhang Xiu. Without anyone to lead the way, Zhang Xiu wouldn't be able to enter. However, the old man left her behind. He had everything planned out. Zhang Xiu said, "How is it? Are you still not willing to reveal the location of the Lingxi Pavilion?" The female master looked at Zhang Xiu with an ashen face. "Everything is already under your control. Is it still my turn to make irresponsible remarks?" She knew that struggling was useless. It would only bring her worse results. "Sect leader Jiang, I am willing to bring you into the Lingxi Pavilion, but I hope you can let me go. When the time comes, let us go." The female master held the child tightly in her arms. To her, the child was extremely important. She could die, but she had to care about the child's feelings. Zhang Xiu smiled coldly. "Now that things have come to this, it's no longer up to you." Zhang Xiu would never let a loser negotiate with him. Everything was already under his control. He could easily decide her life and death. Why should he pity her? This world never sympathized with the weak. "Sect leader Jiang, you are indeed very strong. However, the Lingxi Pavilion is not an ordinary sect. No matter how strong you are, entering the Lingxi Pavilion will not bode well for you. Why don't you retreat? You will still be the all-powerful sect leader of Qianqing School." Zhang Xiu laughed coldly. "What? Sect leader Jiang, if you don't believe me, don't blame me for not warning you. The Lingxi Pavilion's history can be traced back to ancient times. It has existed since then. The sect's connections are rich, and there are many strong cultivators. I have only seen the tip of the iceberg." Zhang Xiu said, "Oh?" The female master continued, "Actually, the Lingxi Pavilion has been open to the public before. In fact, every once in a while, the Lingxi Pavilion would gather the strongest geniuses in the world and invite them to the Lingxi Pavilion. However, those who came to the Lingxi Pavilion never left." Zhang Xiu said, "Killed?" The female master shook her head. "You didn't kill them, but they didn't want to leave?" "Why? No one could abandon everything they had and stay in a completely unfamiliar place that was controlled by others. If it were Zhang Xiu, he would definitely not tolerate it unless he was controlled or killed by the Consonance Pavilion. Once they enter the Consonance Pavilion, even if we chase them away, they won't leave." The more he spoke, the more ridiculous it sounded. Who would be willing to stay in the Lingxi Pavilion and not leave? If they were the top geniuses of their time, who wouldn't have shouldered the heavy responsibility of the sect? How could they not leave? The female master said, because the Consonance Pavilion has announced to them a cultivation technique that can be considered an emperor-level cultivator. However, this cultivation technique is too difficult, and the time required to cultivate it is also too long. After a long time, the outside world has already changed. Moreover, they are confused about becoming emperor-level cultivators, so naturally, they are unwilling to leave. Unless one day, they really become emperors. Zhang Xiu asked, then has there been anyone who has become an immortal emperor? I'm not sure about this either. There are many different opinions. In fact, although I have been to the Lingxi Pavilion and have been working for it, I have never been able to come into contact with the true core figures and existences. The Lingxi Pavilion that I have seen is only the tip of the iceberg. Zhang Xiu believed this. If she was a core figure, then she wouldn't have worked outside, and she wouldn't have risked her life to test him for a large golden pill. After finding out that he was difficult to deal with, she immediately gave up because the Lingxi Pavilion's motto was to be kind to others. However, in the end, Zhang Xiu had come to find her. Therefore, the Lingxi Pavilion has recruited too many experts. You should give up. According to the Lingxi Pavilion's motto of being kind to others, they probably won't pursue this matter. Zhang Xiu shook his head. The so-called kindness of the Lingxi Pavilion was actually a facade because they had always placed themselves in an aloof position. Only when there was no conflict of interest would they be kind to others. In fact, because Zhang Xiu had threatened the reputation of the Lingxi Pavilion and almost destroyed it, he actually wanted to kill Zhang Xiu. From this, it could be seen that the Lingxi Pavilion was only a mortal. Today, Zhang Xiu had already killed him and made him an immortal king. Would the Lingxi Pavilion be willing to let this matter rest? This was really hard to say. Although they wouldn't do anything on the surface, it was really hard to say what would happen in secret. How would I know if I don't try? This time, his true purpose of coming here was not revenge. Revenge was only secondary. His true purpose was to clarify the relationship between him and the goddess. This was extremely important to him, and only the Lingxi Pavilion had this answer. Sect leader Zhang still won't listen to my advice? Suwen, the head of Qianqing School, Zhang Luoxia, is a genius. Today, I've seen him with my own eyes. However, I've never heard of sect leader Zhang being so stubborn. Zhang Xiu only smiled. She had been trying to persuade him all this time. Of course, her goal was not for Zhang Xiu, but to get rid of Zhang Xiu. She didn't know how firm Zhang Xiu's goal was. Zhang Xiu turned around. It's already late today. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Don't try to escape. This will only bring disaster to your child. His figure flashed and disappeared from where he stood. He needed to rest because the old man was injured. Seeing that Zhang Xiu didn't chase after him, he didn't immediately return to the Lingxi Pavilion. Instead, he found a place to treat his wound. If it wasn't so urgent, there was no need for him to risk aggravating his injury by rushing back. However, Zhang Xiu knew that he would definitely return to the Lingxi Pavilion to report this. This was such an important matter, and he only sent a letter back. How could he come back? Zhang Xiu would definitely come to kill him. Zhang Xiu returned to the tavern and actually took a nap. The female master really didn't dare to escape because she couldn't afford to gamble. If she angered Zhang Xiu, he would really kill her child. No one would joke around with a child's life. From the strength that Zhang Xiu displayed yesterday, it could really be described as shocking. Even if she tried to escape 1,000 miles away, she was afraid that Zhang Xiu would catch up to her. Since that was the case, it was better to be obedient. Morning. Zhang Xiu came out from his bedroom and saw Lu Boishuan tending to his wound in the courtyard. When he saw Zhang Xiu, he asked with a smile, Zhang Ge, are you still going to take the exam today? Lu Boishuan had already noticed that Zhang Xiu wasn't ordinary. Moreover, Zhang Xiu had killed several people from the First Heaven Tower yesterday. Yes, of course I'm going. The old man was still in the wilderness. The restriction technique that Zhang Xiu had placed on his body had a time limit and a vague location. The further away he was, the more vague it would be. However, Zhang Xiu still firmly believed that once his injury was healed, he would return to the Lingxi Pavilion as soon as possible. Yesterday, the female master didn't look for trouble with Zhang Gu. I can see that the one he wants the most is her. Zhang Xiu smiled meaningfully. When the female master saw that Zhang Xiu didn't show up, she didn't dare to run away. However, she felt that leaving her post would be too conspicuous. Therefore, she went to the First Heaven Tower's exam hall. She didn't expect that she would bump into Zhang Xiu there. Meeting again, although the location was the same, the mood was completely different. The person in front of her was the famous Zhang Luoxia, the #1 genius in the past 3,000 years. Just like the previous years, she was the invigilator. Zhang Xiu said, "It seems like he's already rushing to the Lingxi Pavilion." The female master frowned and said, "I've already said that even if you find the Lingxi Pavilion, it's useless. You'll only be throwing your life away. Don't regret it when the time comes." Lu Buoxuan was astonished when he heard this. "Zhang Gu, you're going to the Lingxi Pavilion?" Zhang Xiu nodded. "Yes." Lu Buoxuan's face revealed an astonished expression. "Zhang Gu, the Lingxi Pavilion isn't a place that just anyone can enter. I heard that those who enter the Lingxi Pavilion must die. Not a single one can live." Zhang Xiu said, "Then they must have the ability to kill me." Lu Buoxuan said, "There are countless experts in the Lingxi Pavilion. I've heard that there are hundreds to thousands of immortal kings, or even more. Since ancient times, countless geniuses have entered the Lingxi Pavilion and all of them died." Zhang Xiu smiled. "How did you know?" The female master was a member of the Lingxi Pavilion. Only then did she know that Lu Buoxuan was just an ordinary person. Lu Buoxuan said, "I've loved reading history since I was young, especially the history of the various large sections. The Lingxi Pavilion is the most unique existence. I've done quite a lot of research on it. I discovered that there were records of the Lingxi Pavilion recruiting top geniuses in the world. Moreover, there were as many as 13 times. Moreover, these people never returned." "You can't go. If you go, you won't be able to return. Trust me. You must not go." Chapter 777. There was no place in the world that Zhang Xiu didn't dare to go, and there was no place that Zhang Xiu couldn't reach, and there was nothing that could shake Zhang Xiu. He said, "How would I know if I don't go?" His tone was calm, but incomparably firm. Lu Buoxuan could only shake his head inwardly, as if he was helpless against Zhang Xiu's stubbornness. He also felt that this kind of stubbornness was ridiculous. Anyone who lost their life because of stubbornness could be said to be stupid. "He has already left." Lu Buoxuan couldn't tell, but the female sage naturally knew that he was referring to the old man. He should be rushing towards the Consonance Pavilion. To the female sage, this was really bad news. "Let's go," Zhang Xiu said to Lu Buoxuan and immediately took the lead to rush over. Lu Buoxuan was still anxiously shouting from below, Zhang Gu, don't go." The female sage wasn't very cooperative. She deliberately slowed down her speed. However, Zhang Xiu wasn't anxious at all, nor did he force her. The talisman that Zhang Xiu had placed on the old man's body wouldn't disappear in a short period of time. It would be fine as long as the seat was there. In fact, the Consonance Pavilion wasn't far from the First Heaven Tower. They were both in the free travel realm. With the speed of an immortal king, it wouldn't take long for them to reach there. Zhang Xiu had previously read about a city in the sky in an ancient book. There were many other similar existences that existed in the sky at a very high altitude. Now, he saw it again. However, this time, it was on top of an indescribably huge tree. In the vast and misty sky, there was a huge fruit tree. The tree's roots were intricate, extending for tens of thousands of miles. The tree was surrounded by mountains, as if it was the ground. If it weren't for Zhang Xiu's amazing eyesight that allowed him to see the whole picture from such a distance, ordinary people would find it hard to imagine that such an existence existed. Everyone could only see the tip of the iceberg. It was just like how people couldn't imagine that the Earth was round. Before the satellites took pictures of the Earth, who could see the whole picture of the Earth? This is the Consonance Pavilion? It was so huge that Zhang Xiu was amazed. His Tianqing school was nothing compared to it. This is the entrance to the Consonance Pavilion. He found a spot on the tree trunk and walked forward. The tree trunk in front of him emitted a gentle light, and then a gap opened. Even if you can see the mountains, rivers, and lakes inside, if you don't enter through the entrance, you won't be able to enter. Those mountains, rivers, and lakes are just a mirage. You can see them, but you can never reach them. After passing through the soft light and entering the interior, Zhang Xiu felt as if the entire world had become clear. He could hear the sweet chirping of birds and the sound of flowing water. As far as the eye could see, there were lush green mountains and waterfalls. It was an extremely magnificent picture of mountains and rivers. It could be said that it lived up to the name of the Heaven Realm. Before Zhang Xiu's arrival, the Consonance Pavilion had already set up an inescapable net. Who would dare to attack the Consonance Pavilion? This was something that had never happened before. Almost as soon as Zhang Xiu and the woman appeared in the Consonance Pavilion, the people of the Consonance Pavilion rushed over. Chen Xinyu, you dare to betray the Consonance Pavilion? The female master frowned and glared at her. The one who exposed the location of the Consonance Pavilion was Elder Li Wen. The other party obviously didn't buy it. Chen Xinyu, you traitor. The female master said angrily, what right do you have to judge me? The pavilion master has already given the order to arrest you. From beginning to end, his gaze never landed on Zhang Xiu. It was a blatant disdain, as if this unprecedented intruder was not worthy of his attention at all. In front of the Consonance Pavilion, everything was trash. Nonsense. The group of people behind him glared at him. You're simply using your position to avenge a private grudge. The other party laughed heartily. Using my position to avenge a private grudge? Chen Xinyu, you need to give me a chance. If you didn't bring an outsider into the Consonance Pavilion, how could I have such a chance? His eyes gradually turned cold. Regardless of your relationship with the second pavilion master, just this point alone is enough to convict you. Your actions have thoroughly angered the pavilion master and many elders. The pavilion master has already given the order to arrest you. You dare. The female master was quite imposing. You sinister villain. You must have spouted nonsense in front of the two pavilion masters and many elders. The man smiled sinisterly. Take them down. The group of people behind him who had been rubbing their hands for a long time immediately rushed over. A cold voice came from beside Chen Xinyu. Zhang Xiu had already flashed out. Die. Since he had found the Consonance Pavilion's lair, Zhang Xiu naturally wouldn't be polite to the people of the Consonance Pavilion. The suppressed anger in his heart surged, and his killing intent soared. Zhang Xiu waved his finger, and the person in the lead was sent flying backward. The wrath of the God Emperor caused heaven and earth to wail, and even the sky itself seemed to tremble in fear. Then, the person's head exploded, leaving behind a mangled mess of flesh and blood. The corpse fell. With a thud. Jealousy of the same sect. The Consonance Pavilion is nothing more than this. Die. Zhang Xiu took a step forward and pointed a finger at the person who had made things difficult for the female master, Ouyang Shanlan. Immediately, a large hole was directly pierced through the body of the person who had made things difficult for the female master. Then, the power of the aura crushed over, and there wasn't even a corpse left behind. It turned into a bloody pulp. This formation. The leader and the strongest fighter were killed in an instant, and the people below panicked. The first thing they did was to form a formation. The Consonance Pavilion's formations were definitely extraordinary. They should have collected the most powerful formations in the world. However, Zhang Xiu waved his long sleeve. Like ants. When he waved his long sleeve, more than 10,000 gene of strength appeared on the long sleeve. When the strength was released, the whole world seemed to be distorted. In front of Zhang Xiu, these people didn't have the slightest chance to fight back. The Consonance Pavilion sent a bunch of trash. They underestimated me. With a loud bang, countless wind blades flashed inside. After a dazzling scene, more than 10 people wearing the Consonance Pavilion's clothes were cut into countless pieces. Jiang. Seeing this scene, Master Chen Sinyu's face changed. It was too cruel, too ruthless. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 people were killed. These were all from the Consonance Pavilion. Since they have already given the order to arrest you, why are you still being polite to them? Jiang Xiu finished speaking and walked forward. No, it must be Ouyang Shanlon. According to the rules of the Consonance Pavilion, when someone commits a crime, especially when the decision to sentence him to death, a meeting must be held. Jiang Xiu didn't care. He simply didn't know. Right now, he just wanted to kill to his heart's content. Consonance Pavilion's Pavilion Master, Jiang Luoxia, has come to visit. Hurry up and show yourself. His voice was like the teachings of an ancient god. It shook the entire Consonance Pavilion for thousands of li. Among the mountains, in the rivers, in the fishes, in the birds, in the grass and trees, thunder rumbled. It was like a sound wave sweeping across the Consonance Pavilion. In the Consonance Pavilion, there were many buildings and countless disciples. Some were holding books, some were copying information, and some were studying sword arts. When they heard the voice, they were all stunned and couldn't believe it. Someone broke into the Consonance Pavilion? This was simply too unbelievable. No outsider had ever entered the Consonance Pavilion. Even when the top geniuses were recruited, they were in another area. After confirming their character and completing brainwashing, they were allowed to enter. There were also some students who were in class. Of course, they weren't taught magic, but information gathering techniques. There were also some top-level secretaries who could spy on people's souls. All in all, it was related to information gathering. Elder, someone broke into the mountain gate. A disciple stood up agitatedly. Suddenly, the class was in chaos. Don't be distracted. Focus on your studies. The lecturer was an old man who looked very wise. He was holding a scroll in his hand. He was very calm, but his eyes betrayed him deeply. His eyes were drifting outside, hoping that a disciple would come and tell him the truth. He seems to be Jiang Luoxia. Is he the Chenqing School's pavilion master who left behind 9 mysteries to cleanse the sky, established 1,000 years of work, and is unrestrained and romantic? The disciples, who were usually well-behaved and hurriedly agreed to whatever the teacher said, couldn't calm down. Their hearts were flying out of their bodies. The teacher himself was also confused. How could an outsider enter? And it's the Chenqing School's pavilion master. How dare he break into our mountain gate? Chapter 778. In the central hall of the Consonance Pavilion, the old pavilion master, the old second pavilion master, and many other elders were all sitting cross-legged. The layout of the hall was maintained in a very ancient style, and they seemed to be in the middle of a fierce debate. Li Wan, who had just escaped, was sitting in the middle seat. He should have just reported the message that Jiang Xiu had asked him to deliver. There's nothing to say right now. Jiang Luoxia dared to kill people of our Pavilion of Consonance and even threatened to attack us. He really doesn't put our Pavilion of Consonance in his eyes. If we don't kill him, we won't be able to wake the world up, a man said, the veins on his forehead bulging. He was very angry. Yes, the 4th Pavilion Master is right. Someone else immediately agreed. Everyone present expressed their great anger. Back then, this brat dared to provoke our Pavilion of Consonance just because he was a little clever. He almost ruined the reputation of our Pavilion of Consonance. He's just the most outstanding genius of the past 3,000 years. In the long river of history, he's not even a hair. If we don't teach him a lesson, he really thinks that there's no one else in this world? The old man sitting on the throne closed his eyes and didn't say anything. The second pavilion master beside him was also very quiet. 4th Pavilion Master, Lu Dong, has already brought his disciples over. It won't be long before they capture Jiang Luoxia. What does he mean by 9 mysteries cleansing the heavens and eternal legacy? How arrogant! It's time to make him suffer. The old man sitting on the throne spoke for the first time. Has the assessment of Jiang Luoxia's cultivation been completed? Before Jiang Xiu came to find them, a great battle had taken place in the Yan state. Jiang Xiu cleaned up the rebels of the Qianqing school and killed more than 10 celestial kings in one fell swoop. When this news came, the Pavilion of Consonance was also a little shocked. Although it didn't mean much to them, it was still one of the more shocking battles in the past few thousand years. Especially Jiang Luoxia's cultivation. Many people were curious about it, so the Pavilion of Consonance began to investigate it from then on. The second pavilion master replied, "My initial judgment is that the laws are time, space, wind, and fire. Time and space have fused together to form the laws of the world. Wind has reached perfection, but there shouldn't be any fire. The reason why it is so powerful is because of its bloodline." If Jiang Xiu were here to hear the words of the Consonance Pavilion's second pavilion master, he would definitely be shocked. At that time, Jiang Xiu's cultivation was indeed at this level. It could be said that there was no difference at all. The Consonance Pavilion's collection of data and their grasp of various situations were too accurate. The old pavilion master nodded and said, "With this kind of cultivation, this kind of bloodline, it is indeed so powerful." Bloodline? What bloodline does Jiang Luoxia have? The people on the side were very curious, but the two big shots sitting there didn't say anything. The old pavilion master closed his eyes again and said, "If that's the case, even if Ouyang Shanlon went there, he might not be able to bring her back." The fourth pavilion master frowned. Lu Dong was his favorite disciple. "Old pavilion master, aren't you overestimating Jiang Luoxia? Ouyang Shanlon's cultivation is not low. With the fusion of 4 great Daos, he is far from being comparable to an ordinary immortal king." The old pavilion master said, "Send a few more people. It's best if they bring back those who won't harm his life. In the future, let this Qianqing school's head stay in my Qianqing school. Don't let him step into the outside world for as long as he lives." This old pavilion master wanted to imprison Jiang Xiu for life. His methods could be said to be ruthless. For someone like Jiang Xiu, to capture and imprison him was a huge humiliation. It was even more humiliating than killing him. Only the fourth pavilion master didn't think so. He felt that it was enough for his favorite disciple to go. "In my opinion, Jiang Luoxia killed a few of our disciples and threatened to charge into the Lingxi pavilion. He just wanted to get back at us and vent his anger. He might not really dare to come." Just as he was speaking, there was an earth-shattering sound. The entire mountain where the central hall was located shook. The disciples outside the hall rushed in hurriedly. Pavilion masters and elders, they're fighting their way in. What? The fourth pavilion master slammed the table and stood up. The expressions of the two seated pavilion masters also changed greatly. "Where's Ouyang Shanlon?" That person said in a trembling voice. Dead. He was killed by Jiang Luoxia with a wave of his sleeve, along with more than 10 disciples that he brought with him. Huff, huff, huff. The fourth pavilion master was so angry that his whole body trembled. He couldn't even speak. He stood there panting for air. After a while he cursed, "Trash." At this moment, Jiang Xiu's body flashed like lightning. His long hair was useless, and his domineering aura was overflowing. He looked down on the world. "It's really under Jiang Lu." The people who saw him were shocked. Those who break into the Consonance Pavilion will be killed without mercy. Immediately, a disciple shouted angrily. As soon as his voice fell, countless disciples of the Consonance Pavilion rushed out from the sky and from the buildings in all directions. Some of them were holding swords and some were holding sabers in their hands. They rushed out together. "Kill him!" With a roar, the sky was filled with spells. Humph! Facing these people, Jiang Xiu only opened his mouth and blew a mouthful of turbid air. But in the next moment, there was a thunderous explosion. The wind suddenly expanded to hundreds of feet, thousands of feet, and tens of thousands of feet. It swept across the sky. It was too magnificent. Ah! There were screams and wails. The spells collided with the wind and disappeared without a trace. The people who were swept by the wind were directly swept into the sky. Those who were weak in physical strength were torn apart on the spot. So strong. It was not only the wind that was strong, but also the speed at which Zhang Xiu cast spells. It was too terrifying. Everyone knew that the momentum of the wind was different from other things. It had to go through a process of growth, especially this gale that covered the sky. If such a huge gale could be formed in an instant, then who would fight with him? There was simply no way to deal with him. "Teacher, what should we do?" At the edge of the cliff railing of the distant pavilion, the disciples looked at the gale that swept across the sky in shock. "What a powerful Zhang Luoxia," the teacher also said sincerely. The more one understood the power of an immortal king, the more they understood the nature of forming such a gale, and the more they knew about Zhang Xiu's power. The power of an immortal king was the power of the hidden armor. It was extremely subtle. The moment it erupted, it was very difficult to control. As for such a gale that was formed in an instant, he knew that he could not do it. In reality, celestial kings weren't suited to casting large-scale spells. Putting aside the difficulty, they wouldn't be able to afford the consumption of their dermic powers. In this instant, it was likely that they would exhaust all of their dermic powers. If they didn't die, what was the point of continuing the battle? The gale condensed. The gale that swept across the sky was actually compressed infinitely in the high-speed rotation. From the initial formless, to now, one could faintly see that it had become a blade. The 30,000-meter-long blade contained countless wind blades that wreaked havoc within. Just looking at it made one feel incomparable fear. It was impossible to imagine the power of the slash from the heavens, and even more impossible to imagine the lethality of the wind blades that wreaked havoc when the 30,000-meter-long blade exploded. Kill him. The disciples went crazy. They wanted to kill Zhang Xiu before he completed the spell. However, they once again underestimated the speed at which Zhang Xiu condensed the wind into a blade. In just a moment, the blade light was already flashing, and the momentum of the blade was suppressing the sky. In the next moment, the blade had already slashed down. When this blade slashed down, the entire sky pressed down, and the terrifying air pressure sank. The first thing that could be seen was that the trees all over the mountain were bent by the pressure, and the dust on the ground was pushed away by the violent airflow. Then, the ground emitted a rumbling sound, and cracks appeared. As for the people who rushed toward Zhang Xiu, their faces and bodies were directly weathered into nothingness. They could not see or hear. At the last moment, before they could react, they had already ceased to exist. When the long blade slashed on the mountain that was 30,000 meters tall, the mountain did not shake much. The blade light was too sharp. From the distant horizon, a gap was cut open. From a medium angle, it was cut into half in the middle of the mountain. And standing in the middle, one would realize that it was a valley. This gap was hundreds of meters wide. It could be said to be a spectacle. And wherever the blade light passed, everything no longer existed. Whether it was people or objects, even the void was cut open, and dazzling white light constantly burst out from inside. The group of students and the instructor were scared out of their wits. The crack was right next to them, less than 10 meters away. Everything in front of them no longer existed. It was empty. Only after looking for a few hundred meters did they see the bright and clean wall on the other side. Chapter 779. It was a shocking strike, a shocking strike. The teacher's face turned pale. Although Zhang Xiu didn't destroy the Consonance Pavilion signboard that day, he still managed to cut the Consonance Pavilion in half with a single slash. In addition to being shocked, his face was also burning hot. The Consonance Pavilion's face had been slapped miserably. Zhang Xiu had come to their sect and killed so many of their disciples. Not to mention, the entire sect had been split into two halves by him. It was easy to destroy, but difficult to repair. It was hard to say whether such a tall mountain could be repaired. Moreover, there was a faint saber intent surging in this chasm-like chasm. This was a provocation, a slap in the face. How is this possible? What kind of monster is Zhang Luoxia? How can he be so powerful? Above the broken peak, there were still fragments of stone falling from above. Chen Xinyu was stunned again. Previously, she had thought that Zhang Xiu was powerful, but she didn't expect him to be so powerful. The celestial king of the Lingxi Pavilion and so many disciples were like ants in front of his shocking strike. Zhang Xiu took another step forward. Looking at him again, the aura he exuded was almost suffocating. The so-called spiritual cultivation was to have the wind and clouds by your side when you were still and lightning when you were moving. You looked down on the world with cold eyes. In the face of such a person, the disciples of the Lingxi Pavilion were sincerely shocked. In the Pavilion of Consonance, there were indeed many strong cultivators, but none of them possessed the same ferocity as Zhang Xiu. Of course, there would be times when they would fight, but they would never fight with their full strength. As such, they would never be able to cultivate the temperament of a king like Zhang Xiu, who had walked the path of slaughter. This was the aura accumulated by the blood of countless strong cultivators. Stop! The teacher roared and flew toward Zhang Luoxia, hovering in the void. Zhang Luoxia, you are the leader of the Qianqing school. If you bully the weak and kill the innocent, will you still have the demeanor of a sect leader? Seeing so many disciples being killed and the sect being humiliated, even though he was someone who stood aloof from worldly affairs and only wanted to be a teacher, he still couldn't calm himself down. He couldn't help but rush out with a frown. You want to avenge them? The mentor was also very nervous. Zhang Luoxia was too strong. He knew that he had no chance of winning. Moreover, he was not good at communicating with others. Teacher, you must kill Zhang Luoxia to avenge our brothers. Just as they were riding a tiger and finding it hard to dismount, streaks of light finally shot out from the central hall. They were densely packed like fishes swimming over, covering a distance of tens of miles. To these immortal kings, it only took a blink of an eye. Old Pavilion Master! Old Pavilion Master! When the disciples saw who it was, they all bowed. At the same time, they were filled with grief. Too many disciples had died, and the sect had been cut in half by Zhang Xiu. They had lost all face. Zhang Luoxia, you actually dare to step into my Lingxi Pavilion? The fourth Pavilion Master was furious. Just now, Zhang Xiu had slapped his face. He had just said that Zhang Xiu wouldn't dare to come, and in the end, Zhang Xiu came. What judgment! What a joke! Zhang Xiu's long hair fluttered in the wind. His eyes flashed as he leisurely said, Sect, what kind of forbidden ground is the Lingxi Pavilion? Why can't I enter? Umph! The fourth Pavilion Master coldly snorted. The old Pavilion Master had already said, Sect Leader Zhang, you are also the sect leader of a great sect. Why are you so ungentlemanly? You killed so many of my disciples and even destroyed my Lingxi Pavilion? Zhang Xiu calmly said, I'm here to settle the score with your Lingxi Pavilion. Do I still have to be polite? Settle the score? Everyone felt that it was inconceivable. The Lingxi Pavilion had never made enemies with anyone. When did they have a grudge with Zhang Luoxia? I wonder what kind of score sect leader Zhang wants to settle? The old Pavilion Master had a blank look on his face. It was as if he really didn't know what was going on. Or, he was deliberately playing dumb. Zhang Xiu coldly snorted. Old Pavilion Master, you don't understand? Then, since I'm here, I'll let you die with a clear understanding. When I was in trouble, I thought that the Zhang Xiu before he became famous was walking around the sect. Your Lingxi Pavilion deliberately revealed that I had the right to ask questions in front of the Qianqing school's traitor, the Ji Daoist sect. Isn't that the same as telling the Ji Daoist sect that Zhang Xiu is Zhang Luoxia? You want him to kill me? The reason is that I almost had my picture smashed by your Lingxi Pavilion at Qingling Mountain. You wanted to take revenge. Unfortunately, the Ji Daoist sect at that time was a fake Ji Daoist sect. It was a substitute used by the Ji Daoist sect to lure the enemy. Because of this, I was able to avoid being killed. The surroundings fell silent. Zhang Xiu almost caused the Lingxi Pavilion's reputation to be destroyed. This matter had caused quite a stir within the Lingxi Pavilion. It could be said that it had angered all the disciples of the Lingxi Pavilion. Of course, everyone knew about it. They didn't expect that the Lingxi Pavilion would actually retaliate. Many people whispered to each other. Although they were angry that Zhang Xiu had used them and almost destroyed their reputation, taking revenge in public was also a violation of the rules set by the ancestral founder. It was also disgraceful. The old pavilion master muttered to himself. After a while he said, "I didn't know about this matter. If that's really the case, then this old man will apologize to sect leader Jiang." Those who knew about Zhang Luoxia's problem were naturally very high-level figures. Only the pavilion master would know. But as for who it was, he couldn't investigate. Zhang Xiu didn't expect this old man to be so magnanimous. Apologize? Zhang Xiu said, "That's easy to say." The purpose of his visit this time was to clarify his relationship with the goddess. He wanted to know what kind of enmity there was between him and the goddess, and why she had tried to harm him time and time again. "I don't want much. I just want full authority." The old pavilion master nodded and said, "Of course." The pavilion leader, elders, and disciples were all agitated. How could this be? He had barged into the sect and killed so many people. Was the pavilion of consonance supposed to submit to him just for the sake of being kind to others? Zhang Xiu really didn't expect the old pavilion master to be so magnanimous. This kind of magnanimity changed his impression of the Lingxi Pavilion. The question is simple. What is the relationship between me and the goddess of Western Zhou? What is the enmity between us? The old pavilion master was stunned. His eyelids drooped even lower, making it impossible to see his expression. But one could see that his eyeballs were rolling. After a while, he shook his head. Sect leader Jiang, the Lingxi Pavilion cannot answer this question. Please ask another question. Zhang Xiu frowned. Can't answer? Why can't I answer? The old pavilion master said, "The Lingxi Pavilion's questions are answered in different time periods. Your question has been answered in different time periods. Therefore, I cannot answer." Although the old pavilion master refused to answer, as long as he spoke, there was information. The information was that the enmity between Zhang Xiu and the goddess was very ancient. But Zhang Xiu had only arrived here from Earth 3,000 years ago. Strange. It has been exceeded. At this time, I do not have the authority to answer. The Lingxi Pavilion has not agreed to this either. Zhang Xiu didn't believe him. The older the information, the more valuable it was. If the old pavilion master didn't say anything, Zhang Xiu was sure that he didn't want to say anything. Your matter is over. If you don't have any other questions, we can leave them for later. Now, let's talk about the problem between us. Zhang Xiu gathered his thoughts and said with interest, "Our problem?" "That's right, that's our problem. You should know that trespassing into our Spirit Rhino Pavilion is forbidden by the Spirit Rhino Pavilion. The founding ancestor of the Spirit Rhino Pavilion has a rule that anyone who trespasses into the Spirit Rhino Pavilion will be killed without exception." Zhang Xiu's eyes turned cold. "You want to kill me?" "No, the founder of the Lingxi Pavilion also left instructions that only the top geniuses can enter the Lingxi Pavilion. According to our investigation, Sect Master Jiang is indeed the person with the fastest cultivation speed in the past 3,000 years. You can definitely be called a top genius. Therefore, Sect Master Jiang does not need to die." Zhang Xiu coldly snorted. "Speaking of which, this sovereign has to thank the Lingxi Pavilion for its generosity?" The old pavilion master said, "Sect Master Jiang, please don't be in such a hurry to thank us. Although the Lingxi Pavilion will not kill you, you will have to stay in the Lingxi Pavilion for the rest of your life. From now on, you will have no contact with the outside world." Zhang Xiu's eyes suddenly flashed with a terrifying cold light. He furrowed his brows and said, "Your Consonance Pavilion wants to imprison this sovereign? It can't be considered imprisonment, but if Sect Master Jiang wants to understand it that way, then it is imprisonment." Zhang Xiu suddenly raised his head and laughed. "Old Pavilion Master, oh old Pavilion Master, this sovereign will not bother to tell you the truth. From the moment this sovereign stepped into this place, this sovereign has made up his mind to erase this place from the world. Since you have already violated the sex instructions, the Lingxi Pavilion should cease to exist. Chapter 780. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone from the Consonance Pavilion widened their eyes in anger. How dare you! How arrogant! How dare you! The fourth pavilion master roared, Jiang, you're just an insignificant divine cultivator. How dare you claim that you're going to destroy the Consonance Pavilion? What a joke! You don't know that the Consonance Pavilion can fight against the world. Jiang Xiu said disdainfully, how dare you talk about fighting against the world? Don't tell me you can't even deal with me. You're courting death. The fourth pavilion master was enraged. He had always thought highly of himself. This was also a problem that all the disciples of the Consonance Pavilion had. They felt that they knew everything about the outside world and that they were above the rest of the world. They even felt that they were the gods of this world. Now, Jiang Xiu, who was just an ordinary person in their eyes, dared to challenge them. How could they not be angry? A loud bang came from the fourth pavilion master's body. His body turned black and he punched out. When the airflow rushed out, the terrifyingly low temperature condensed a path of solid black ice. A ray of light pierced through the black ice that filled the sky. The fourth pavilion master, who had turned into a ray of light, was covered in a layer of bloody light. Then, his vision blurred and he split into 5 identical rays of light. 5 great paths of heaven perfection? Jiang Xiu was shocked. This kind of strength was really frightening. The moment before he became a divine emperor, he comprehended the great path of heaven perfection. However, his great path of heaven perfection was only an independent great path of heaven perfection. The most difficult step was to merge the great path of heaven perfection, which was also the step that led to a great increase in strength. Jiang Xiu did not take that step because of the power of the great God sealing technique. Even when Jiang Xiu was cultivating, he only fused 3 great paths of heaven perfection, plus half a great path and sword principle. His strength was not at the top. The reason why Jiang Xiu was so famous was mainly because of his fast cultivation. However, the person in front of him had comprehended 5 great paths of heaven perfection and fused them together. If it was in the past, Jiang Xiu could not imagine his strength. However, it was a pity that he didn't have the great investiture art, which was ranked 9th in the Great Tao auction. It could be said that he was an existence that was the general guideline of the divine cultivators. Feeling the surging power, Jiang Xiu could tell that even if Shui Wuyao had a soul mutation, he was still far from being his match. 4 people of Jiang Xiu's generation, most of their strength was still at the great perfection of the fusion of 3 paths. It seemed that they were only a little bit away from the 4 paths. Taking into account the time it took to fuse, it generally took 2,000 to 3,000 years to determine one's talent. The further one progressed, the harder it would be, so it would be slower. After Shui Wuyao's soul mutation, his strength had surpassed the great fusion of 4 paths, nearing the great fusion of 5 paths. Although it seemed like there was only a difference of 1 Dao, at this level, the difference of 1 Dao was like a natural chasm. The difference was huge, and the difference was huge. Strong, he was indeed very strong. No wonder he could become the 4th pavilion master of the Consonance Pavilion. If it was Zhang Luoxia, who was still an immortal cultivator, in front of him, he would really be like a child. At this moment, Jiang Xiu finally met with the peak experts of the immortal martial continent. Boom! Jiang Xiu's entire body exploded. His aura suddenly changed, as if he had ascended to the heavens. He softly said, "Not bad. But it's a pity." Unfortunately, Jiang Xiu had already entered the deity emperor realm, reaching a whole new level. No matter how many great paths he had fused, he was still a celestial king, and his strength would always remain at the level of a celestial king. He was an existence that was inferior to Jiang Xiu. The power in Jiang Xiu's body swept out. When he raised his hand high, a violent wind instantly surged around him, and the heavens and earth changed. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Rip! His hand chopped down, bringing about a faintly discernible blade light. However, when the blade light rushed out, it also split into 5, and each of them was aimed at the 5 different powers. The fourth Pavilion Master's technique could be said to be extremely powerful. It fused with the external incarnation that ordinary cultivators spent most of their lives. It could even be said that there were only a few immortal kings who could truly cultivate it. This was an extremely profound secret of the Golden Core Great Tao. In theory, as long as one had 2 Great Perfection Great Tao, they could cultivate it. In other words, great celestial immortals could use it. However, there were only a few celestial kings who could truly cultivate it. However, this fourth Pavilion Master had used 5 external incarnations. It could even be said to be a little heaven-defying. It brought great shock to Zhang Xiu. However, as Zhang Xiu said, it was a pity. Boom, 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 boom. The collision of powers was extremely terrifying. It was as if the heavens were roaring. Under the explosion of the 5 powers, the crimson shadow on the opposite side paused. Then, in the next moment, space and time flipped, and he retreated. He seemed to be calm, but his eyes were filled with extreme shock. He almost lost his voice and shouted, "How is this possible?" This was because he had been completely and utterly crushed by Zhang Xiu's power. "Impossible!" he roared in his heart. A small piece of trash, the god of minor repairs, had actually crushed him. This was absolutely not allowed. Absolutely not. He felt that his confidence had been thwarted. Seriously thwarted. This was like a god discovering that a lowly commoner's power was above his. His confidence would collapse, and he would lose control of himself. He even wanted to roar to vent his anger. Zhang Xiu's eyes flashed with a cold light. His strength had crushed his opponent, but his magical technique had also amazed his opponent. His opponent's strength was much stronger than his opponent's, but he was able to dodge it with such a strange secret technique. It was also somewhat inconceivable. For example, Zhang Xiu possessed the laws of the world, so he should have been the one to cast such a spell. But in the end, the Consonance Pavilion's foundation was truly astonishing. Humph! Zhang Xiu snorted coldly and slashed out with his saber. With a rumbling sound, a silver-white crystal-like saber light appeared. It was an indescribable saber light, and it exuded a saber intent that could be broken. It made people feel incomparably terrified. The blade light whizzed towards the fourth Pavilion Master with astonishing chi. At this moment, the fourth Pavilion Master's pupils shrunk, his eyes flashing with anger. Although he hadn't stepped into the immortal Emperor realm, he had always thought that he was very close to it. But now, he was forced to retreat by a lowly brat who only had a cultivation base of 3,000 years. He roared, "Don't be arrogant." Just as he was about to cast another technique, Zhang Xiu's arm shook. Light flickered faintly, and then countless shadows dispersed, locking the fourth Pavilion Master in place. The fourth Pavilion Master had many divine abilities. Naturally, he wouldn't allow him to do as he pleased. "Condense." Zhang Xiu lightly spat out a word. An elder at the side chuckled. "I thought the famous Zhang Luoxia would have some great ability, but it turns out that he's just a small fry. I'm really going to laugh my head off." With such a low cultivation base, he actually cast such an unorthodox magical technique to trap the fourth Pavilion Master. That's right. He'll be crushed to pieces in the next moment. At this time, almost all the disciples of the Consonance Pavilion had arrived. They wanted to witness this unparalleled battle that was hard to come by in thousands of years. Just when everyone was convinced that Zhang Xiu was going to lose, the second Pavilion Master let out a soft exclamation. "What a surprise! There are so many mistakes in our assessment of Zhang Luoxia's cultivation base. His cultivation base shouldn't be so strong even if his bloodline is included. His strength has already surpassed the fusion of 5 Tao laws. It doesn't make sense." The old Pavilion Master also furrowed his white brows and said in a deep voice, "Indeed, how could his strength be so much higher than what we estimated? Our estimation shouldn't have been wrong. Even if it was wrong, it should only be a little bit off. Could it be that he has just broken through recently?" The old pavilion master's eyes suddenly lit up, but they soon dimmed. This idea was too ridiculous. No matter how talented a person was, it was impossible to fuse 3 or 4 Tao laws in just a few years. The second pavilion master said, Zhang Luoxia's data has always been very strange. From our investigation, he was only a heavenly god when he first returned to the Tianqing school. After that, he became a great heavenly god. After that, he cleaned up the sect and became a divine king. This cultivation speed is really unparalleled. And now, Zhang Xiu's cultivation base was so strong that it could be mentioned in the same breath as the fourth pavilion master. Zhang Xiu roared angrily, "Die for me!" The blade slashed fiercely. Chapter 781. Slash. The long saber in Zhang Xiu's hand slashed down, forming a silver line that flashed instantly. Although it was not as shocking as the previous slash, nor was it as powerful as the slash that destroyed the fourth pavilion master's 5 external incarnations, it was still the fastest. His opponent could use a secret technique to get rid of his saber intent and was not bound by qi. He could even use a space-time shift to dodge the saber light. This showed how powerful this person was. No matter how powerful the attack was, it would be useless if it could not hit the opponent. Therefore, he had to be fast, so fast that he could not use his secret technique. The technique that Zhang Xiu used just now, which was a joke, was the most basic camouflage technique. He did not even intend to use it to trap the fourth pavilion master. Its real purpose was... The fourth pavilion master did not even have time to scream before he saw a flash of white light. He instantly realized that he had been hit by the saber. He was disturbed by the black smoke and realized it too late. The effect of the black smoke might be so short that it could not be described with numbers. However, in a battle of this level, this short amount of time was sometimes the key to victory. You? The fourth pavilion master's eyes were filled with horror and his face turned pale. He did not feel anything when the saber slid past him, but it was definitely not a fake move. He must have been hit. The next moment, he felt pain. He realized that his upper body was separated from his lower body at his waist. You! The fourth pavilion master roared madly. It was unknown whether he was in pain or despair. He was actually cut into 2 by Zhang Xiu. The fourth pavilion master screamed crazily. His hair was disheveled and he looked like he had gone mad. Blood gushed out from the cut and his body fell down. Fourth pavilion master! Everyone cried out in panic. Everyone in the Consonance Pavilion, who had been full of confidence, was shocked by this sudden scene. Fourth pavilion master was dismembered? Fourth pavilion master! The old pavilion master and second pavilion master were also speechless. Thief, how dare you! Just a moment ago, he was still able to maintain his composure and address Zhang Xiu as Sect Master Zhang. However, when he saw that Zhang Xiu had actually dismembered the fourth pavilion master, he was filled with hatred. This was a peak-stage immortal king who had fused 5 Taos together. Within the Consonance Pavilion, he was also a top-notch expert. No matter how many of those disciples died, they could still be found and recruited again. However, such an immortal king could only be encountered by chance and not sought. There were not many who could reach his level. There wasn't even a single one in 10,000 years. Now, he had been killed by Zhang Xiu. How could he not hate him? In exchange for my senior brother's life. A man at the side roared and stomped his foot. There was no place to step on in the void, but this stomp caused the entire sky to tremble as if he was stepping on the ground. Sky-shattering fist. The energy in his body surged, and the surrounding space twisted and rotated. His muscles swelled up as if he was filled with air. Power was transmitted from his feet to his head. He charged over fiercely like a furious dragon emerging from the sea. His fist aura was monstrous. Invisible energy surged, and the space twisted, forming a fist shadow. Then, another one appeared, and another one appeared. One fist after another, and each fist was heavier than the last. Bang, bang, bang. A series of dense fist shadows came over, and in the next moment, all of them were about to land on Zhang Xiu's body. Good fist technique. Is this the sky-shattering art that is said to be able to shatter the sky? Many disciples in the distance exclaimed. This fist technique was said to be the pinnacle of the fist techniques collected by the Consonance Pavilion. Although the disciples had heard of it long ago, this was the first time they saw it. This time, even the calm and composed old pavilion master and second pavilion master became nervous. Even the fourth pavilion master had been defeated. Could this fist technique win? This person was obviously full of confidence in his fist technique. He kept throwing out fist after fist, and one punch could shatter the sky. And now, he had thrown out no less than 100 or 1,000 punches, and the sky was filled with dazzling fist shadows. Slash again. Zhang Xiu's long saber whistled, and the sound of the saber filled the sky. It was different from the quick slash just now. This slash was as powerful as the previous one, and it carried an unparalleled force as it slashed down from the sky. Ah! The fist shadows that filled the sky were sliced by the saber, and a shrill scream could be heard. Just like the fourth pavilion master, he was slashed in half and fell from the sky. This time, the entire crowd was stunned. What fourth pavilion master of the Consonance Pavilion? What sky-shattering fist technique? Under Zhang Xiu's saber, it was as if they were made of paper. They couldn't resist at all. Terrifying, too terrifying. Master Chen Xinyu, who was kidnapped by Zhang Xiu, was shocked to the extreme. Zhang Xiu killing the fourth pavilion master and Elder Qi was beyond his expectations. However, Zhang Xiu didn't give him the greatest shock. So far, no matter who Zhang Xiu dealt with, they were all killed in an instant. This was really terrifying. In the past, he only thought that Zhang Xiu was a divine king. But now, he felt that he was unfathomable. What kind of existence were the fourth pavilion master and Elder Qi? It was said that in order to comprehend the sky-shattering fist technique, one had to fuse at least 4 paths. And yet, the two of them were killed by Zhang Xiu as if they were vegetables. Elder! The people below shouted. Everyone, don't hold back. Attack together. Seeing the 2 top experts of the Consonance Pavilion being killed by Zhang Xiu in an instant, they finally realized how powerful Zhang Xiu was. The pavilion masters and elders no longer cared about their status. They attacked together. We swear to kill this thief. All of a sudden, the sky was filled with all kinds of 7-colored glaze, and earth-shattering spells that covered the sky and covered the earth. The Consonance Pavilion contained all the top spells in the world, and now they were all used to greet Zhang Xiu. The power was really quite shocking. Perhaps no one would dare to say that they could survive such an attack. Hee. Zhang Xiu snorted. He put the long saber in his hand down to his waist and said softly. Then, a faint cyclone could be seen under the tip of the saber. Then, the long saber slashed forward. With a loud bang, a wind wall swept out from under the saber. In the next moment, it rose to a height of tens of meters. Zhang Xiu was isolated from everything in front of him. Bang bang bang. This saber contained the great perfection of wind and saber intent. Countless spells crashed into the wind wall. They were either blocked by the wind or destroyed by the saber intent before they could pass through the wind wall. This wind wall was like a grinder. Any spells that came into contact with it were immediately destroyed. How? It's impossible. Seeing this scene, the pavilion masters and elders who were casting spells at the back changed their expressions. If what Zhang Xiu showed just now was powerful attack power, then this spell completely reflected Zhang Xiu's powerful defense power. The strength that Zhang Xiu showed was completely beyond their imagination. Burn! In the wind wall, a faint red light could be seen. Suddenly, fierce flames rushed out and formed the power of wind and fire. They pushed forward like a beast, as if they were going to devour heaven and earth. Oh no! Someone cried out in alarm. Immediately, chaos ensued. It was as if ghosts were wailing and wolves were howling. The flames had already engulfed them. Almost instantly, the person at the very front of the group turned red before the flames even reached him. In the next moment, he was charred. When the wind and fire swept over, the layers upon layers of figures that wanted to escape were all charred and sent flying away. They died upon contact. However, these were all celestial kings among celestial kings. The 4 pavilion masters were not the only ones who had fused with the great perfection of 5 paths. They were all burned to death. What a terrifying wind and fire! Looking at the bright red flames in the sky, the disciples below were dumbfounded. Their faces were red and they were completely dumbfounded. Their minds were blank. They only felt that a boundless space was spreading out from the bottom of their hearts. Their bodies trembled and their hair stood on end. Zhang Luoxia, how dare you be so ruthless? The old pavilion master's eyes that were half covered by his eyelids widened. In the blink of an eye, the Consonance Pavilion suffered heavy losses. It was simply destroyed, half of them. These people were all the core members of the Consonance Pavilion. He was already enraged by the deaths of the 4 pavilion masters, not to mention the dozens of casualties now. Stop! The old pavilion master roared like a madman. The disciples had never seen the old pavilion master like this. The old pavilion master had always been a refined and wise man. He had seen through everything. Even a few simple words contained extreme wisdom. He didn't even reprimand them. Everyone was extremely convinced by him. But now, he had lost his composure. What's wrong? Is the old pavilion master finally going to make a move? Zhang Xiu laughed. Don't you want to imprison me in the Consonance Pavilion? Then come. Chapter 782. The old pavilion master's voice was very low. One could feel his anger that was like a volcano that was being suppressed. Sect leader Jiang, what a good move. Your cultivation level has really surprised my pavilion of consonance. My pavilion of consonance has suffered such a great loss. However, Zhang Luoxia, from now on, you won't be able to walk out of the consonance pavilion. Blood dyed the sky. His long hair danced in the wind. Zhang Xiu's slender and strong body floated in the air. His whole body exuded an indescribable aura of a king. His eyes flashed with lightning. Then let me test the strength of the old pavilion master of the Consonance Pavilion. Drunken Linglong. The old pavilion master pondered for a moment. Then, he took out a jade talisman that emitted a faint glow. He cast a spell on the jade talisman. Then, the jade talisman flashed with a purple light. Then, it emitted a hazy shadow. Zhang Xiu's expression changed slightly. Just now, the jade talisman flashed with a purple light. It made him feel like the power of a divine emperor. Then, the purple light on the jade talisman became more and more intense. Then, countless purple words gushed out from it and entered the shadow. Soon, the shadow became completely purple. Merge. The old pavilion master placed the talisman on his forehead. The purple shadow merged with the old pavilion master's body. Zhang Xiu had never seen such a secret technique. He was secretly shocked. Then, he could clearly feel the old pavilion master's spirit and aura skyrocketing. Ha ha ha, Zhang Luoxia, you are lucky to have seen such a secret technique. The old pavilion master's body expanded like an inflated balloon. His originally stooped body, arms, shoulders, torso, waist, and thighs all swelled up. His muscles filled up. Bang! The clothes on his upper body were the first to burst open, revealing a white and solid body that many young people envied. No, it was a young body that was incomparably strong. The lines of his muscles were clearly defined, and his pecs and 8-pack abs were clearly visible. Crackle! His originally thin and small stature had also grown taller. The messy white hair on his head that was like withered grass had all fallen off. Strands of black hair grew out from his scalp at a speed visible to the naked eye, all the way to his waist. In less than half a minute, the dying old man had turned into a muscular young man in his prime. His skin was purplish black, and runes could be faintly seen on it. Not only Zhang Xiu, but many of the Consonance Pavilion's disciples were also shocked. Zhang Xiu's eyes flickered. dark purple skin, could it be a demon? Demon! The old pavilion master suddenly stretched out his hand, and a blood-red sword appeared in his hand. With a casual wave of his hand, a sword light that was dozens of feet long shot out. The aura of this sword was no weaker than Jiang Xiu's. Just the way he held the sword gave off an extremely terrifying aura that made it hard for people to breathe, enveloping the surroundings. Quick! This was Jiang Xiu's first thought. In an instant, Jiang Xiu also moved. He was fast, but Jiang Xiu was not slow either. In an instant, the two forces collided. Boom! 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 The collision of forces produced a silent explosion. The sword and saber intertwined. Their eyes met. In a flash, Jiang Xiu's eyes flashed. His opponent's strength was beyond his imagination. 7 Daos fusion, plus the power of a demon. As expected of the old pavilion lord. In Jiang Xiu's impression, the grand fusion of 5 Daos should be very close to the immortal emperor realm. Because he had set up the god sealing monument with 6 weapons, he believed that the grand fusion of 6 Daos was the immortal emperor realm. However, he didn't expect that the old pavilion lord wasn't even at the grand fusion of 7 Daos. It seemed that the grand fusion of 6 Daos was the foundation. Strong, indeed strong. The force erupted, and a huge residual force scattered in all directions. As long as it came into contact with dust or small solid objects in the void, it would explode. Whoosh! The two crossed each other and rose into the sky at the same time. In the next moment, they were already hundreds of miles away. It was as if 2 missiles were constantly changing their positions at high speed and colliding with each other. The earth-shattering sound echoed for thousands of miles. Ha! The old pavilion master was very surprised. After a few rounds, Jiang Xiu was actually able to defend against his attacks. Therefore, his attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Jiang Luoxia, you really surprised me. However, you have also forced me to kill you. Even with his cultivation base and secret technique, he was still unable to take down Jiang Xiu in a short period of time. This was far beyond his expectations. Moreover, Jiang Xiu was actually able to stand on equal footing with him. Blood Soul. This was a sword that defied the heavens. The moment the sword was unleashed, the sky turned pitch black. Only the blood-red sword light was moving slowly. It was extremely strange. Soul attack. Sword Soul. Although Jiang Xiu's expression didn't change, the shock in his heart increased. With the old pavilion master's cultivation base, he was actually a soul mutated. The power of his sword soul attack had completely taken shape. It was as if it had materialized and pierced into Jiang Xiu's soul. A soul attack with such spiritual power was probably something that even soul defense treasures couldn't defend against. The reason why even the lowest level soul defense treasures could defend against most soul attacks wasn't because these treasures were awesome. In fact, they could actually protect the soul. Even a small layer of membrane could be pierced through by an infant. If it protected the soul, then normal soul attacks wouldn't be able to pierce through it. It wasn't that the membrane was too strong, but that soul attacks were too weak. Now, the old pavilion master's sword was like a real sword piercing into Jiang Xiu's soul. No soul defense treasures could defend against that. The old pavilion master was actually this strong. To be able to use such a trump card, the old pavilion master was forced into a dead end by Jiang Xiu. He originally wanted to imprison Jiang Xiu, but seeing that he couldn't capture him, he could only kill him. The soul defense formed by the Skywalker mirror is just a thin membrane. Don't take it out and embarrass yourself. The old pavilion master's voice was filled with contempt. Jiang Xiu's vision turned white. It was as if his brain had been pierced by lightning. Then, there was no more. The long sword in his hand slashed, and a resplendent sword light shone in the pitch-black sky. Jiang Xiu's sword move didn't feel like a soul attack, but under the strange scene created by his opponent, it actually felt like a soul attack. You! The old pavilion master was shocked. His soul attack didn't cause any damage to Jiang Xiu. That was fine, but his opponent actually used a soul attack on him. He hurriedly stood up straight and recited an incantation. Then, a ball of light rose behind his head like a rising sun. The ball of light was dazzling, illuminating the pitch-black sky. Seeing the old pavilion master's secret technique, Jiang Xiu's eyes lit up. The soul was more or less inclined to Yin. It was light and qi, but it was also not light and qi. However, it was also afraid of yang light. It was a pity that he was wrong. How could someone who didn't even have a soul use the soul slash? Under the illumination of the ball of light, the sword showed its true form. It wasn't a soul attack. No. The old pavilion master cried out in alarm. The sword light was already in front of him. He couldn't be scared to death. Roar! The old pavilion master let out a strange roar. The demonic aura on his body rippled. Jiang Xiu's sword light slashed at his neck, but the sword trembled violently and couldn't move an inch further. Jiang Xiu could even feel the sword cutting into his skin. What's wrong? Jiang Xiu was shocked. His terrifying strength couldn't break through the old pavilion master's physical defense. This demon's strength and body were too weak. Zhang Luoxia, how did you block my soul attack? The old pavilion master's aura soared. Demonic aura surged. But it doesn't matter. I'm not curious. I just want you to die. The old pavilion master knew that if he was curious when facing an enemy, he would bury a huge hidden danger. It was also a taboo. Die. He could only sigh in his heart. Such a genius was going to be destroyed just like that. Gotcha. The blood sword in his hand appeared like a red flame. It faintly emitted a purple light. This light seemed to cut through the sky from an extremely distant and ancient place, crossing time and space to arrive here. At this moment, the sword light had already slashed through Jiang Xiu's body. Chapter 783. Killed, he killed? Everyone present was shocked. They had been beaten up too badly by Jiang Xiu. Now that the old pavilion master had made a move, if they still couldn't take him down, the Consonance Pavilion would lose all face. Ha ha ha, he's finally dead. Someone jumped in excitement. It's too easy for him to die just like that. Jiang Xiu stood alone in the void. There was still a sword scar on his body. He didn't move at all, only his long hair and clothes fluttering in the wind. Huh? The old pavilion master was puzzled. Jiang Xiu's divine body was indeed pierced by his sword technique, but why wasn't he bleeding? There was no reason for his body to not bleed after being cut open. Even if it was an ancient divine body, Jiang Xiu was still standing there. The wind was very strong, causing his long hair to flutter. A strange scene happened. Jiang Xiu, who was supposed to be dead, actually slowly raised his head. What, he's not dead? He's not dead even like that? The people below all exclaimed. The old pavilion master's face also changed greatly. His demonized face revealed a look of fear. Although he was in a daze, it was still clear to see. Old pavilion master's sword Tao and cultivation should be at the peak of the immortal kings. I think you must have not made a breakthrough for many years. Jiang Xiu's voice drifted over. This time, the old pavilion master could no longer remain calm. You. Not only was Jiang Xiu not dead, his tone was still as relaxed as before. How is this possible? The old pavilion master couldn't understand. First, his soul attack was ineffective. Now, his physical attack was also ineffective. Didn't this mean that Zhang Luoxia was unkillable? When this thought appeared, cold sweat dripped down his forehead. Cold sweat was also considered strange. Suddenly, the old pavilion master thought of something and looked at Jiang Xiu. On Jiang Xiu's forehead, there was a faint purple light flashing, and on his body, there was a faint silver heavens question talisman flashing. He had changed completely, as if he was above the whole world. When Jiang Xiu raised his head and the old pavilion master saw the unique purple mark on his forehead, he felt a strong sense of suffocation, as if someone was strangling him. God, Emperor. Others might not recognize the purple mark on Jiang Xiu's forehead, but how could the old pavilion lord, who knew the world, not know that this was the mark of a king? "You've become a godly emperor?" "No." At this moment, the old pavilion master finally understood why Jiang Xiu was so strong. Even when facing him, no matter how he attacked, he couldn't kill Jiang Xiu. It was because Jiang Xiu was a godly emperor. According to the records of the Consonance Pavilion, only an emperor could kill an emperor. Other than that, no other power could kill them. What, a godly emperor? Oh, this time, the pot exploded, completely exploded. Zhang Luoxia was a godly emperor? Countless people were stunned by the old pavilion master's words. Everything that had happened in the Consonance Pavilion today was not as shocking as this news. After so many years, there was actually an emperor. Everyone in the Consonance Pavilion knew that in order to become a godly emperor, every 30,000 years, they would recruit top geniuses in the world. Their purpose was to cultivate a godly emperor. It was a painstaking effort. However, the heavens played a big joke on the Consonance Pavilion. There was no emperor in the Consonance Pavilion. Instead, the enemy of the Consonance Pavilion had become an emperor. The entire void was under Jiang Xiu's control. He had an inexhaustible amount of energy, and he was so powerful that he was completely above all of their races. It turned out that he had not shown his true strength. His long hair was still fluttering in the wind. His domineering aura was peerless as he looked down on the world. Countless runes condensed into a long saber. Suddenly, it shone brightly. With a light wave, he shouted, "Descend the 9 mysteries to cleanse the heavens." Godly Emperor, Zhang Luoxia. In an instant, everyone could no longer see anything else in their field of vision. There was only the blade and Jiang Xiu's body. It was as if an ancient god had come to create the world, opening up the world and destroying everything. 100 immortals of immortal martial arts worship. Heaven sings. All time, space, spirit chi, spells, and speed seem to have been split in half by this slash. No. In the midst of a crazy roar, the saber fell. No matter how furious you are, you can't hurt me at all. If I wave my saber, heaven and earth will collapse. Boom. The whole world, including mountains and rocks, collapsed. Countless people, in shock and despair, died under this saber. Hundreds of thousands of disciples of the Consonance Pavilion were killed. Ah! Countless screams resounded throughout the Consonance Pavilion. Boom, boom, boom. After the saber fell, the smoke in the sky floated into the sky like a mushroom cloud. After a long time, it might have been a minute, a day, a year, or a century. When the smoke settled, the demon was directly killed in the old pavilion master's body, revealing his true appearance. He was an old man on the verge of death. His white hair was like weeds, and a line of blood flowed down. "This is an emperor?" The old pavilion master looked at Jiang Xiu in horror. "The power of an emperor is beyond your imagination." Jiang Xiu said indifferently, "Although you have almost reached the limit of a king, you have not stepped into the world of an emperor. You will always be a martial artist." Jiang Xiu's saber was not the best. At least, he did not even have a saber soul. However, because he was an emperor, his power was really unparalleled in the world. "Old pavilion master, what should we do now?" The old pavilion master's face alternated between green and white. The winner takes all. The divine emperor was not someone he could fight against. The Consonance Pavilion was known for its knowledge of the world. What was laughable was that he had made a mortal enemy of such a person. Now, Zhang Luoxia had destroyed the Consonance Pavilion. What a pity! As far as the eye could see, within a radius of thousands of miles, the entire Consonance Pavilion had been destroyed by his saber strike. Countless scrolls that had been collected by the predecessors had also been destroyed at this moment. The Consonance Pavilion existed in name only. He looked at Jiang Xiu with shock, hatred, and anger in his eyes, but in the end, all of these turned into deep regret. Jiang Xiu's words were true. Since the Consonance Pavilion had gone against the original intention of the ancestor of the Consonance Pavilion, the Consonance Pavilion should not exist. Jiang Xiu looked at him and said, "Now, I will give you two options. 1. Tell me the answer I want to know. What is the relationship between me and the goddess of Western Zhou? What is the enmity between us? 2. Destroy the Consonance Pavilion." Ha 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 ha. The old pavilion master suddenly burst into laughter. However, his laughter sounded somewhat desolate. "Zhang Luoxia, do you think the Consonance Pavilion is so weak? Do you think you can destroy the Consonance Pavilion just because you have become a divine emperor? You are still far from that." The old pavilion master struggled to get up from the ground. "You are a divine emperor. Has the Consonance Pavilion never had a divine emperor before?" Of course, of course." As he spoke, he took out something and raised it high. It seemed to be a talisman. "Array, rise." Jiang Xiu frowned. It was not a talisman, but a ceremonial text. The entire earth shook and a faint light rose up from the ground. It slowly rose up and brought the gravel on the ground with it. "What is this?" Looking up, the seven-colored light screen in the sky was forming a huge vortex. The vortex slowly descended from the sky, leaving a long tail behind it. It shrouded the seats they were in. Huh! At the same time, the whole world was changing. Slowly, a fog appeared, fusing with the power of all kinds of laws. As a divine emperor, you should be able to feel this. Touch it and you will die. Nothing can withstand it. Even a divine emperor will die without a doubt. World-destroying curse. Jiang Xiu frowned. He had never heard of this before, but this power was definitely not something that the severely injured pavilion master could use. It must be a treasure left behind by the ancestors of the Consonance Pavilion, and it must have been left behind by an emperor-level cultivator. World-destroying curse? The old pavilion master said, "Zhang Luoxia, although you are a divine emperor, it is a pity that you have not been able to announce it to the world. You have to praise my Consonance Pavilion. What a pity! But this is the consequence of offending my Consonance Pavilion." A vast power continued to fall from the sky. It was as if the clouds were pressing down, layer upon layer, bringing with it an incomparably terrifying pressure. It was as if heaven and earth were about to become one again. "Die, Zhang Luoxia!" The old pavilion master roared. Chapter 784. Are we going to perish together? Jiang Xiu felt his divine body gradually weakening. Moreover, he didn't know how to deal with such a strange formation. The terrifying rainbow-colored clouds rolling down from the sky was a powerful curse that could destroy everything. Jiang Xiu knew that if he became weak, he would probably die when he came into contact with this power. "Zhang Luoxia, are you afraid?" Jiang Xiu's eyes were gloomy. There should only be one world annihilation curse, and it was used when the sect was in danger. Ha ha ha, this is the wrath of the heavens. The old pavilion master laughed crazily. Although he laughed bitterly because he was going to die and the Consonance Pavilion was going to be destroyed, he was still very proud that he could drag a divine emperor down with him. Jiang Xiu said, "Since things have come to this, pavilion master, can you tell me what I want to know?" Ha 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 ha. The old pavilion master laughed even more happily. Jiang Xiu's words at this moment were no different from surrendering. He was begging for mercy. Impossible. The question you want to know has an ancient character on it. It doesn't belong to our time period. Even I don't have the authority to open it. The old pavilion master said, "This is a huge taboo. Once it's opened, according to the Consonance Pavilion's leftist philosophy, there should be danger hidden inside. It might even trigger a terrible natural disaster, or the so-called wrath of the heavens." Jiang Xiu's eyes sank. Now that he was going to die, the old pavilion master had no reason to lie. "Where is that thing?" The old pavilion master said, "Of course it's in the forbidden area of the Consonance Pavilion." "Not here." "Of course it's here. But the ancestors have already set up a seal. Ordinary power can't destroy it. Even your blade couldn't touch it." Just as he was speaking, someone fell to the ground and painfully clutched his throat. "Am I going to die? It's so uncomfortable, so painful." For this person to be able to survive Jiang Xiu's strike just now, he was naturally not an ordinary person. Me too." The second pavilion master's body wobbled and fell to the ground. "So uncomfortable." She reached out to cover her neck, only to feel a burning sensation in her throat. It was as if the entire air was filled with poison. She felt that every breath she took brought her a little closer to death. However, if she held her breath, the poison would immediately enter her body once it touched her skin. Dragging a divine emperor to the grave with my consonance pavilion is not too bad. The old consonance pavilion master looked like he was about to cry, but he still gritted his teeth and looked at Jiang Xiu. He was so angry that his flesh was trembling. "Let's see if you die or not." The consonance pavilion, which had been passed down to this day, was destroyed in his hands today. "I've already said that you don't understand emperors at all." This object was left behind by an immortal emperor, and it indeed had the power to kill emperors. However, Jiang Xiu's life source, the god-sealing steel, stood in the void. Hula! An indescribable feeling appeared in the sky. The seven-colored smoke seemed to have met its greatest nemesis. A huge steel fell from the sky. They passed through the colorful clouds and landed on the ground in countless forms. Suppress. The steel emitted a faint glow with an extremely ancient and mysterious power. It quickly burned the colorful clouds into ashes. As for the steel that landed on the ground, it seemed to ripple with a ring of power. The strands of light that rose into the sky were all suppressed, and the ground no longer trembled. Jiang Xiu felt a wave of comfort in his body, and his eyes flashed with lightning. He had never known the use of the god-sealing steel, but he was certain that it had the effect of suppressing the world. In less than a moment, the destroyed mountain range of the Consonance Pavilion returned to its original state. A cool breeze blew, blowing away the so-called power. Those who survived also relaxed. How? Looking at the colorful clouds in the sky dissipating bit by bit, the old Consonance Pavilion master's face was filled with extreme fear. It was as if he had gone crazy. Come back quickly." Jiang Xiu's gaze coldly swept over. "I've said it before. You, an immortal king, are too weak to be an emperor-level existence. Even if my body is destroyed, it's impossible for you to kill me. As long as the god-sealing steel was not destroyed, he would not die." "No, impossible." The ancestor of the Consonance Pavilion said that everything can be destroyed, including emperor-level existences. After the old Consonance Pavilion master went crazy, it was as if he had lost his mind. In front of a divine emperor, my Consonance Pavilion accepts defeat wholeheartedly. They had already lost, and there was no turning back. "Can you spare our lives?" The old Consonance Pavilion master raised his head with difficulty and looked at Jiang Xiu. There was a pleading look in his eyes. He understood that he had no chance of winning. Jiang Xiu said, "When your Consonance Pavilion threatened to imprison me, did you think about letting me go? When you tried to kill me, did you think that this would happen?" The old Consonance Pavilion master's face was ashen. "The Consonance Pavilion cannot be destroyed." Jiang Xiu said, "Why? Give me a reason." The old Consonance Pavilion master stammered. The Consonance Pavilion could not be destroyed for him, but for Jiang Xiu, it did not matter. Because there are many things that people in the world want to ask the Consonance Pavilion. Without the Consonance Pavilion, where would they go to ask? These words aroused the anger in Jiang Xiu's heart. It would have been better if he did not say these words, but he did. He thought too highly of himself and thought too highly of himself. Bullshit. If people in the world want an answer, then they should find it themselves. If they can't find it, then so be it. Do you think the Consonance Pavilion is so important? The old Consonance Pavilion master had forgotten that the reason Jiang Xiu wanted to find trouble with the Consonance Pavilion was because the Consonance Pavilion had almost killed Jiang Xiu because of this. Just as Jiang Xiu said, A sect that had lost its integrity and was detached from worldly affairs had gone against the wishes of its ancestor. There was no need for it to exist. Moreover, there was no such organization on earth. Didn't the world continue to revolve? No one should think too highly of themselves. Are you worthy of saying that you are doing this for the world? The old Consonance Pavilion Master's face alternated between green and white. In this world, there was no one who did not fear death. After discovering that there was no way to kill Jiang Xiu, he naturally did not want to die. The longer one lived, the more they coveted life. Zhang Luoxia, my Consonance Pavilion is not so simple. You cannot kill me, you cannot. Jiang Xiu's eyes flickered. A long saber fell from the sky, piercing through his body. It was also at this moment that Jiang Xiu felt the God-sealing monument move. A light flashed in his mind. Could it be? Without hesitation, he pointed his finger at the God-sealing monument and an incantation was activated. In the next moment, Jiang Xiu opened his mouth and chanted the incantation. Then, the divine tool appeared. Jiang Xiu saw an identical figure walk out of the old Consonance Pavilion Master's body. It was like a projection and walked toward the God-sealing monument. There were many deity positions above it. Jiang Xiu casually pointed at the one at the bottom. According to his logic, the higher the deity position, the more powerful it should be. Then, an even more miraculous scene happened. The old Consonance Pavilion Master, who was originally a celestial king, underwent a huge change. He should have been a celestial, but at this moment, he became a god cultivator and an additional godhead appeared out of nowhere. Moreover, the godhead was the perfect fusion of 7 nomological laws and a soul mutation. In short, it was exactly the same level as the previous celestial cultivator, except that it changed from celestial cultivation to spiritual cultivation. Then he obtained the deity position. At this moment, a gust of wind blew past. The old Consonance Pavilion Master's body on the ground was blown away like mud powder, leaving behind a humanoid figure. This subordinate pays his respects to Lord Divine Emperor. The old Consonance Pavilion Master's temperament had undergone an obvious change. He bowed deeply to Jiang Xiu. This time, Jiang Xiu was stunned. The so-called God-sealing monument actually had such an effect. It could actually confer a celestial killer as a god. This was really too miraculous. Didn't that mean that as long as there were enough deity positions on the God-sealing monument, he could kill all the celestial cultivators in the entire immortal martial continent and make them his deity puppets? Stand up. In the future, you will be under my command. The old Consonance Pavilion Master bowed respectfully and said, "Understood." After saying that, his body gradually faded away. In the end, he transformed into a light that flashed and flew toward the God-sealing monument. In an instant, he disappeared. However, there was an additional name on the monument. Chapter 785. That's the light of the divine Tao? Seeing the old Pavilion Master disappear and turn into a soft light, Jiang Xiu finally understood what the light of the divine path was. On earth, he only saw the divine light but not the person. If he guessed correctly, it should be a treasure similar to the God-sealing tablet. There was no place for the divine position to be placed, and after a long time, it became a spirit body like a lonely soul. Some of them were left behind in the mortal world of earth, and some of them had transcended the constraints of space or crossed space to enter the great void. Those were supposed to be the sealed positions of gods. And the name that appeared on the God-sealing monument, Hidden Heaven God, Lei Qianqiu. Only now did Jiang Xiu know that the old Pavilion Master's real name was Lei Qianqiu. Do you have anything else to say? Jiang Xiu's gaze swept across the crowd. Those who had witnessed this scene were all silent. Even the old Pavilion Master had been killed and sealed as a Shikigami. Their strength was far inferior, so how could they resist? Jiang Xiu's gaze fell on the second Pavilion Master. Back at Qingling Mountain, the two had crossed paths. The one who had been swindled by Jiang Xiu was this person. But now, he was no longer as majestic and mysterious as before. Lying on the ground, his aged face was pale. He looked at Zhang Xiu with hatred and fear in his eyes. "Speak, where is the old pavilion master's collection of information from ancient times?" Zhang Xiu believed that the one who knew about this was definitely not the old pavilion lord. Even if it was only the old pavilion lord who knew about this, he would definitely have taken precautions. For example, if the old pavilion lord suddenly had an accident, Zhang Xiu, as the pavilion lord, was very clear about the importance of this matter to the continuation of the pavilion lord's legacy. Although the pavilion of consonance was special and claimed to be isolated from the rest of the world, and did not have any conflicts with the outside world, naturally, they would not cause any trouble. However, there was always a chance that Zhang Xiu would come for them. The second pavilion master said, "The old pavilion master repeatedly warned that the seal scroll cannot be opened. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Sect Master Zhang, it's not that I don't want to, but there's no other way. Those who can open the seal scroll have all been killed by you." Zhang Xiu looked around and saw that almost all of the Consonance Pavilion's disciples had been killed. It was possible that the disciples who should have obtained the inheritance had been killed as well. Where is it? Zhang Xiu didn't want to dwell on whether the inheritor was dead or not. He wanted to find the item first. The second pavilion master hesitated. "You don't want to talk." Zhang Xiu glanced over and saw the second pavilion master waving his hand as a beam of light shot out. Time and space seemed to be torn apart as the second pavilion master's throat was sliced open. This second pavilion master might have a cultivation base at the grand fusion of the 6 paths. As the beam of light shot out, the 10 immortal kings behind him all had their throats sliced open. Some of them were even peak-stage immortal kings at the grand fusion of the 6 paths like the second pavilion master. Their throats were also sliced open. In an instant, more than a dozen immortal kings fell to the ground. He chanted an incantation and the immortal kings left their immortal bodies one by one and entered the god-sealing monument to be conferred as gods. Then, the corpses on the ground were blown away by the wind like clay figurines, turning into mud powder and dissipating into the air. Then, more than a dozen divine lights flashed and fell from the sky. They turned into the people who were killed by Zhang Xiu just now. There were more than a dozen of them. All of them had turned from immortals to god cultivators. They all knelt down and saluted. The immortal kings shouted in unison, "Greetings, Lord Divine Emperor." "I'm asking you, where is the item?" The second pavilion master said, "Lord Divine Emperor, please follow me." This time, the second pavilion master didn't refuse. She was already considered dead. There was a saying on earth called the separation of yin and yang. Once a person died, all the troubles in the yang world would be put down. The same was true for the second pavilion master and the others. They were considered dead once. Everything in the past had nothing to do with them anymore. It was the same for everything in the Lingxi pavilion. Zhang Xiu followed them to an underground palace. The prison of the palace shocked Zhang Xiu. Even the power of the divine emperor couldn't destroy this place during the battle. The palace wasn't big. There was a long table in the distance with a scroll floating in the air. "Lord Divine Emperor, that's..." The second pavilion master pointed in that direction. "However, this scroll is very special. It's from the ancient spacetime. When the seal is opened, unpredictable things will happen. Therefore, the ancestors of the Lingxi pavilion ordered that no one is to touch it." Zhang Xiu sneered. These people were so contradictory. Since they weren't allowed to touch it, why did they keep it? They could have just destroyed it. However, he couldn't bear to do so. Then, there was this contradiction. Chi. Zhang Xiu wanted to go over, but when he got close, he was stopped by a soft force. Green eye technique. A purple light flashed in his eyes. Only then did he see that there was a layer of golden film around the scroll, isolating it from the outside world. The second pavilion master said, "Lord Divine Emperor, there should be an isolation film here." Only the old pavilion master and the chosen one know how to remove it. However, they are both dead now. The chosen one? The second pavilion master said, "Yes, the successor of the Lingxi pavilion." "Killed by this lord?" The second pavilion master said, "I didn't see him. He was in the pavilion. If he was, he would be dead. However, maybe he isn't. Humph, a mere film of light wants to stop this lord." Zhang Xiu softly chanted an incantation. When he walked forward, the space-time in front of him reversed. It was as if there was another world. Under everyone's doubtful gaze, Zhang Xiu once again stepped forward. The distorted space passed through the film. In the next moment, Zhang Xiu entered it. The divine kings looked at each other. It seemed that all the taboos of the Qianqing school were useless in front of Zhang Xiu. This film of light was indeed powerful, but it could only stop those below the divine emperor level. Because the divine emperor relied on nothingness, it was difficult for anything with a tangible form to stop him. Moreover, Zhang Xiu was well versed in the laws of the world. When he passed through, he saw that the scroll was held in the void by a golden brilliance. He reached out and grabbed it. "You got it just like that." The second pavilion master felt dizzy. Zhang Xiu tried to open the scroll, but there really was a layer of indescribable space-time sealing power on it. He couldn't open it. This made him frown. If Zhang Xiu tried to force it open, he was afraid that the scroll would be damaged and the contents inside would be lost. That would be a loss. Go and investigate whether or not the chosen one is in the pavilion today. If the person who could open the seal was harmed by his blade, then the scroll would be difficult to open. It might even be impossible to open it. When he thought of this, Zhang Xiu felt his teeth ache. Replying to the divine emperor, "Can you summon Lei Qianqiu for questioning?" Zhang Xiu nodded slightly. With a flash of divine light, the old pavilion master appeared in front of Zhang Xiu again. He couldn't open the seal now because he had turned from an immortal to a god. The old pavilion master bowed and said, replying to the divine emperor, "He didn't seem to be here. This subordinate chased him out." The old pavilion master said, "He still needs to temper his temperament outside. When he came in, he was chased out by this subordinate. This is the rule set by the ancestors of the Consonance Pavilion." Zhang Xiu said, "Then it's easy to handle. What's the name of the destined child?" The old pavilion master said, "His name is Lu Boishuan." "It's him." Zhang Xiu was taken aback. It turned out that the strange and ragged scholar who had tried to stop him from coming to the Consonance Pavilion was the future successor of the Consonance Pavilion. "Does the divine emperor know him?" Zhang Xiu said, "It's fate." This subordinate planted the power to open the seal in his body. "As long as we can find him, we can open the scroll for the divine emperor." Zhang Xiu turned and left. "Then let's go to the first heaven tower." What a coincidence! It was Lu Boishuan. This saved Zhang Xiu the trouble of finding them. Understood. But before he left, the old pavilion master said, "Divine Emperor, can you confer a few more divine thrones? They are all rare geniuses. Although they can't be compared to the divine emperor, there aren't many people in the world who can compare to them." Zhang Xiu nodded. "Then let's do it." The moment the god's sealing monument appeared in the sky, the corpses that had obtained the divine thrones crawled up from the ground. They turned into rays of light and disappeared into the god's sealing monument. There were dozens to hundreds of them. Chapter 786. At this point, the Consonance Pavilion had been destroyed. However, Zhang Xiu would never forget the most precious things in the Consonance Pavilion. He asked, "Where are the secret techniques and formations of the various sects collected by the Consonance Pavilion?" The old pavilion master's eyelids didn't even twitch as he replied, "In the Tao Palace." Of course, these things would be protected, just like the scrolls. Zhang Xiu said coldly, "Take them all away. Don't leave a single one behind." This subordinate obeys. The secret techniques collected by the Consonance Pavilion might be even more complete than those collected by the various sects themselves. Take the Qianqing school for example. Many of the secret techniques of the various sects had been lost in the Qianqing school, yet they were still in the Consonance Pavilion. This made one sigh. At the same time, it also proved that the Consonance Pavilion still had some use. It preserved the inheritance, but unfortunately, it was monopolized by him. Perhaps some people would exchange some of their secrets with the Consonance Pavilion in exchange for their lost secret techniques, but they would be forced to do so. No one would dare to leak their sect's secret techniques unless they had no other choice. But from another point of view, once their sect's secret techniques were mastered by someone else, it was equivalent to their lifeline being grasped by someone else. Regardless of whether they had the intention to subdue their opponent, in terms of mentality, the Consonance Pavilion was already completely above them. It was a disguised form of spiritual bullying. In the Tao Palace of the Consonance Pavilion, Jiang Xiu saw the complete heavenly mirror of the Qianqing school. Once, the former sovereign of the Qianqing school also wanted to exchange the complete heavenly mirror with the Consonance Pavilion. However, in the end, he didn't do so. The main reason was that the Qianqing school didn't have anything good to exchange with the Consonance Pavilion. To be more precise, the Consonance Pavilion didn't care about the things of the Qianqing school. Jiang Xiu still remembered the unwillingness of the former sovereign at the end of his life. He died with his eyes wide open. At that time, he would never have imagined that the person he had entrusted the sect to would one day empty the entire Consonance Pavilion. "Sir, are we going to the Heavenly Tower now?" Jiang Xiu replied. However, after a while, he still didn't move. His body floated in the air as he stared at the strange heavenly tree in a daze. "Milord, milord." Jiang Xiu came back to his senses. "What's wrong?" The old pavilion master had a strange expression on his face as he said, "Sir, you can't be thinking about the heavenly tree, right?" Cough cough. Jiang Xiu's expression was very awkward. The school of spiritual cultivation had been thinking about such a huge celestial tree. It would be great if they could move it back to Qianqing school. How could that be? I'm just casually looking at it. It feels magical. Mystical. The divine emperors looked at each other in dismay. The one who should be worthy of this title should be you. However, looking at Jiang Xiu's appearance, it seemed like he was planning to take over the heavens. However, the problem was that the roots of the heavenly tree were planted in the void. The thickness of the tree trunk was so great that one could see its entire appearance. If this thing could be moved, it would be the same as if a certain someone wanted to take earth for himself. His spiritual cultivation heart was really big. Jiang Xiu still had no intention of leaving. He was still pondering, as if he would not be satisfied until he had squeezed the Consonance Pavilion dry. After a long time, he shook his head. He realized that he was unable to do it with his current ability. "Let's go." Jiang Xiu reluctantly left. This heavenly tree was very strange. He had never seen a tree that did not need to take root in the ground. Its nutrients were like the clouds in the sky, giving Jiang Xiu a boundless and mysterious feeling. He wondered if all trees in ancient times were like this. Jiang Xiu returned to the tavern. The examination was still going on. Little did he know that the Consonance Pavilion's headquarters had been destroyed. A training organization like theirs no longer had any meaning to exist. They could no longer survive. Any organization needed a source of income to survive. Now that this source of income had been cut off, it was naturally impossible for them to continue. However, they did not know that even their pavilion master had died in the Consonance Pavilion. "Waiter, bring 2 jugs of wine." He had no interest in making another trip to the First Heaven Tower. The examination would last for more than 10 days, so Lu Boishuan would naturally return to the tavern. As expected, not long after, Jiang Xiu saw a scholar return with a book on his back. When he saw Jiang Xiu, he was pleasantly surprised. "Jiang Ge, you're back. You're back safe and sound?" Jiang Xiu looked at him indifferently, not saying a word. "Why are you looking at me like that? How did you come back?" Jiang Xiu asked. "Is it him?" The old pavilion master walked out from behind Jiang Xiu's hand. When the people in the tavern saw someone suddenly appear from behind Jiang Xiu, they were startled. Lu Boishuan's eyes widened when he saw the person's appearance. The old pavilion master bowed to Jiang Xiu and said, reporting to the Divine Emperor, "It's him. Old Pavilion Master." Lu Boishuan was shocked. "How did you?" Lei Qianqiu shook his head and said, "The old Pavilion Master is already a thing of the past. Lu Boishuan, the Divine Emperor wants to use your power to open a seal." Divine Emperor. Lu Boishuan's eyes widened even more. "Zhang Ge, you're the Divine Emperor." Zhang Xiu slightly nodded. Whoa, this time the entire tavern was in chaos. Was this for real? Everyone looked at Zhang Xiu with disbelief. They had never heard of anyone actually seeing an Emperor realm expert. Even an immortal king was far away from them. It was like a dream. "This sovereign wants you to open this seal." Zhang Xiu took out a scroll. Lu Boishuan shook his head and said, "Zhang no, Divine Emperor." Even the old Pavilion Master revered Zhang Xiu so much, so he naturally did not dare to be impudent. "You must be mistaken. I'm just an ordinary person, not even a heavenly immortal. If even you can't open the seal, how can I open it?" The old Pavilion Master said, "Of course you can. This is because this old man had long since confirmed your identity and planted the power to open this seal in your body." Lu Boishuan said, "But I don't know how to use this power." The old Pavilion Master said, "It's very simple." After saying this, Zhang Xiu placed the scroll on the long table. The old Pavilion Master reached out his hand and pressed it on Lu Boishuan's head. As soon as he placed it on his head, Lu Boishuan's expression suddenly changed greatly, revealing an expression of pain. An intense light burst out from the top of his head. "Ah!" He cried out in pain, his patched clothes fluttering in the wind. Not only did his face turn pale, cold sweat had already formed on his face, as if he was crying bitterly. Strange runes appeared on the surface of the light that burst out. Not only were they all in reverse order, they were also reflected in a mirror. This senior who laid down this seal really put in a lot of effort to actually design it so deeply. "Open the scroll and let's go." Lu Boishuan cried bitterly, unable to stretch out his hand. Lei Qianqiu anxiously said, "Hurry up, hold back your tears. Open it as soon as possible, and you'll have to cry less." "All right," Lu Boishuan replied, holding back his tears as he stretched out his hand to open the scroll. He really seemed to be crying bitterly. The muscles on his face were violently trembling. Hurry, just a little bit more," the old Pavilion Master anxiously urged from the side. It seemed that the old Pavilion Master himself was also weeping bitterly, his white hair and beard fluttering in the wind. "All right, just a little bit more." But just as Lu Boishuan was about to touch the seal scroll, a strange thing happened. The seal scroll that was quietly floating above the long table suddenly disappeared into thin air. "Where's the seal?" Zhang Xiu stood up. Just a moment ago, he felt a strange energy fluctuation in the void. After that, space-time distorted and the seal disappeared. Someone stole it. Zhang Xiu was greatly shocked. "What's going on?" The people at the side were all dumbfounded. This was too strange. Who had the ability to steal the seal in front of a divine emperor? Zhang Xiu's brows were tightly knitted together. His gaze was as deep as the abyss. He was a divine emperor. Nothing in his surroundings could escape his perception. But the seal scroll suddenly disappeared in front of him. Who is it?" He angrily slammed his palm on the long table. The long table was smashed into smithereens. The old Pavilion Master released Lu Boishuan. Lu Boishuan almost collapsed, but he still curiously reached out his hand to grab the position where the sealing scroll was previously suspended. "It's really gone. Was it stolen by someone?" Lu Boishuan couldn't believe it. Someone could actually steal the seal in front of the old Pavilion Master and a divine emperor. "Who is it?" A person appeared in Zhang Xiu's mind. Chapter 787. When he killed Cheng Lingran on Earth, he was swept away just like this. At that time, Zhang Xiu was very curious about who did it, but he didn't expect that things would change with the passage of time. Zhang Xiu was once again attacked and stole the sealing scroll. The sealing scroll had written the origin and hatred of his relationship with the goddess. The other party's intention of taking it away was very obvious. They didn't want him to know. Did you see what was written on it? Lu Buoxuan shook his head and said, No, I just opened it and the sealing scroll was taken away. I didn't have time to look at it. Moreover, I didn't dare to look at such an important thing. Phew! Zhang Xiu let out a long breath. He had been busy for a while, but at the last moment, he was tricked by someone, especially by his old rival. Zhang Xiu felt his teeth ache slightly. The person who could do this was either related to the goddess or Shanhuang Cheng Lingsu. Could it be that he had to return to Earth to find Cheng Lingsu? To be honest, the person Zhang Xiu didn't want to see the most was her. When he thought of Cheng Lingsu, he felt very strange. He didn't hate her, nor did he blame her. In short, Zhang Xiu wanted to forget this person. Because there were some mysteries that he didn't want to solve. He was afraid that he was wrong. People were always like this. They were afraid that they would make a mistake and were even more afraid to face it. They instinctively wanted to avoid it and stay far away from it. This was the so-called avoidance mentality. Even someone as powerful as Zhang Luoxia was like this. In particular, although Zhang Xiu was a Shanhuang, he knew that his cultivation was not as good as Cheng Lingren's. She was a Shanhuang who had grasped the #1 destiny spell among the 3,000 grand das. Even if Zhang Xiu's grand god sealing art reached grand completion and turned the god sealing steel into a virtuous ritual tool, he was still a bit inferior to Cheng Lingsu. Unless Zhang Xiu cultivated the minor destiny spell to the grand destiny spell. Only then would he be able to surpass Cheng Lingsu. After pondering for a moment, Zhang Xiu said, "Return to the sect." He didn't want to be entangled here. Since the item had already been taken away and he didn't know where to get it back, he would go back and make plans. He had to study the god sealing steel properly and cultivate the great god sealing art to completion first. Zhang Xiu immediately stood up and left. Before he left, he noticed that Lu Buoxuan wanted to say something, so he stopped and asked, "Do you have something to say?" Lu Buoxuan said, "He left just like that." Zhang Xiu thought for a moment and said, "Leave the Channy Pavilion to him. He can do whatever he wants." The old pavilion master behind him nodded. From the first day Zhang Xiu came into contact with Lu Buoxuan, he could feel that Lu Buoxuan had a lot of dissatisfaction with the Consonance Pavilion. Moreover, he was also undergoing the Consonance Pavilion's test, and was also the chosen one, so he must be extraordinary. Leaving the Consonance Pavilion to him was also giving him a place to display his self-worth and take revenge. "Yes, master." On the way back, Zhang Xiu wasn't in a hurry. From time to time, he carefully comprehended the god sealing steel. He faintly felt that the god sealing steel had derived a wave of power, a very vast power. Although it was very subtle and even imperceptible, he could clearly feel it. Zhang Xiu guessed that it should be related to him using the god sealing steel to become a god. This was the only thing that had changed so far. He had reason to believe that becoming a god could increase this power, and this power should be merit. For a world of gods, increasing the number of gods was, of course, the greatest merit. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiu's heart suddenly felt enlightened. Zhang Xiu suddenly frowned. The feeling in front of him made him uncomfortable. He looked into the distance. It turned out that he had arrived at a difficult situation. The last time he came, the retrograde leaf wasn't at home. This time, Zhang Xiu wanted to meet him. As a friend, he had already come to his house. It was a bit unreasonable to not meet him. The next moment, Zhang Xiu's figure flashed and appeared in the Immortal Loathing Palace. The retrograde leaf originally had a lot of disciples. Although it was far from being comparable to the Qianxing School and the Consonance Pavilion, it was still a sect after all. It even occupied a realm. Unfortunately, because of the betrayal of one of the disciples, he killed all the disciples. Now, in front of the Immortal Loathing Palace, there was only an old man sweeping the floor. The sky here was dim, and the black smoke was hazy. The whole world seemed to be black and white, and it cast an inexplicable sadness on people's hearts. No one wanted to stay in such a damned place, but the retrograde leaf's cultivation method required one to stay here and maintain one's state of mind. "Who is your excellency?" Zhang Xiu said, "I'm from the Qianqing school. Is Domain Master Ling here?" "Unfortunately for your excellency, my domain master is not in the realm." "Not yet." Zhang Xiu had no choice but to come here in vain. He said, "If that's the case, then I'll leave first. If Domain Master Ling comes back, tell him that an old friend of the Qianqing school, Zhang Xiu, has come to visit." "Okay." When Zhang Xiu turned to leave, the old man said, "My domain master is in trouble and has gone to Hongye Villa. If it's convenient for your excellency, you can go to Hongye Villa for a visit." "Hongye Villa?" Zhang Xiu nodded slightly. This old man was smart. However, the retrograde leaf encountered some trouble and had to go to Hongye Villa. Zhang Xiu was no stranger to this place. He had a friend there called Hongye One Tier. In the world, some people jokingly called the bitter retrograde leaf and Hongye One Tear as the two-leaf grass. The two of them were unhappy because of this name and had formed a grudge. If they didn't fight, they wouldn't have known each other. In the end, they became friends. Zhang Xiu knew about the retrograde leaf because of Hongye. "Then I'll go." It sounded like the two of them had a good relationship and were known as the two-leaf grass. However, Hongye Villa was very far away. It was very far away from the bitter state and was not on the way to Qianqing school. However, for the sake of his friend, Zhang Xiu was still willing to go. Hongye Villa was a villa. In fact, it was indeed a villa. Originally, Hongye also opened a sect to accept disciples. However, the sect was persecuted and almost destroyed. In the end, he had no choice but to change his name and build a villa. After a long time, he also accepted some disciples. However, the number was very small and he didn't dare to accept too many. There were only a few hundred people in the entire villa. However, sometimes, gold shines. Hongye was different from Zhang Xiu and the retrograde leaf. Zhang Xiu was obsessed with cultivation, and the retrograde leaf was similar. Neither of them was good at teaching disciples. However, Hongye was very good at teaching disciples. Perhaps it was related to the sect's destruction and the lack of disciples. From the bottom of his heart, he still wanted to revitalize the sect. Hongye Villa was located in Hongye Valley. It was a villa. Birds sang and flowers bloomed there. When autumn came, the whole mountain was covered with fiery red leaves. It was very beautiful. In the past, when Zhang Xiu was in high spirits, he would choose to come to Hongye Villa in autumn and form a friendship with Hongye. As he approached Hongye Villa, Zhang Xiu recalled a time when he fought with the retrograde leaf in Hongye Villa. It was at that time that Zhang Xiu found the flaw in the retrograde leaf sword technique and won. Since then, the world knew that there was a flaw in the retrograde leaf sword technique. It was even used by his disciple. To be honest, the betrayal of the retrograde leaf by his disciple had something to do with Zhang Xiu. It's not that long ago, but it feels like we're in another world. Hongye, an old friend is here. Zhang Xiu was no stranger to this place. He was familiar with the place. From afar, Zhang Xiu saw the villa at the foot of the mountain. From above, it was squarish. Zhang Xiu heard energy fluctuations in the villa, and they were at the immortal king level. He thought to himself, could it be that the two of them were practicing? In the past, if the two of them fought, Zhang Xiu really wanted to see it. A battle between experts was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Watching it was more frightening than comprehending it himself. But now, Zhang Xiu was already an immortal emperor. In his opinion, the methods between them were a little too insignificant. It was no longer interesting to watch, and there wasn't much passion. Logically speaking, Hongye was slightly stronger than the retrograde leaf. Originally, the strength of the two of them was about the same. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiu had discovered the flaw in the retrograde leaf's sword technique. Now, he had the possibility of being defeated by any immortal king. One could imagine that although the retrograde leaf was magnanimous and didn't hate Zhang Xiu, he was definitely very unhappy in his heart. Therefore, he was also indifferent to Zhang Luoxia. Something's not right. The villa ahead was filled with a murderous aura. Zhang Xiu was very sensitive to this kind of killing. He could feel it from far away. At this time, the Hongye villa was facing an unprecedented crisis. The enemies of many years had finally found their position. After hiding for so many years, they still couldn't hide in the end. Boom! A strong energy wave rushed out from the distance. Chapter 788. Did something happen? Zhang Xiu's heart skipped a beat. Someone was looking for trouble. No wonder the old man said that he was in trouble. It seemed that Hongye had asked Retrograde Leaf to help him. Therefore, Zhang Xiu sped up and rushed forward. Boom! A loud sound came from the villa. A red ball of light spread out and affected the entire valley. The power of an immortal king could not be underestimated. Villa Master. A black-haired man in red was forced to take a few steps back. Then, he stabbed the long sword in his hand into the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were wide open. He seemed to be angry, but there was no fear. Hongye, today, your Hongye villa will be destroyed in the world. Opposite him stood a group of people wearing black cloaks and green masks with fangs. The mask of the man in the lead was a little special. His entire head was covered with a strange protective cover. Ha ha ha! Hongye laughed. He had a white face and a youthful face. He had a gentle temperament, but now his smile was filled with endless arrogance and anger. Are you going to kill me? His cloak shook. Black Devil, let's see if your black-white palace has the ability to do so. Retrograde Leaf was beside him. Compared to the fair Hongye, Retrograde Leaf's face was green, dry, and lifeless. It would be an exaggeration to say that he was ugly. How are you? Retrograde Leaf could see that Hongye was seriously injured. Moreover, because Hongye used to belong to the black-white sect, his cultivation technique was suppressed too badly by his opponent. I'm fine. Retrograde Leaf frowned. The injury just now was definitely not light. Hongye was holding on. He sighed from the bottom of his heart. He had no choice. Things were different now. Before Retrograde Leaf lost to Zhang Xiu, he was very arrogant. He would challenge anyone he saw without hesitation. However, ever since the flaw in his sword technique was discovered, he could not be arrogant anymore. He could not use his sword technique. He was afraid that he would expose the flaw and harm himself. Now that he had scruples, he was not as arrogant as before. Let me do it. Retrograde Leaf was here to help Hongye. There was no reason for him to stand by and do nothing when the enemy was right in front of him. No, let me do it. Hongye knew his sword technique very well. He would never let Retrograde Leaf do it. Now that Retrograde Leaf was not the same as before, once he made a move and was caught by the enemy, he would die. He would not even have the chance to escape. He did not want to harm Retrograde Leaf. His original intention was to find Retrograde Leaf to fight for him. He did not want him to make a move. Retrograde Leaf's expression became uglier. Are you looking down on me? No. Hongye did not know what to say. He knew that Retrograde Leaf said it on purpose. Everyone knew this, but Retrograde Leaf would not say it usually. However, he said it today. Because he was going to make a move. You know that's not what I meant. Today's matter, you can just stand there. The hatred between my Red Leaves Manor and the Black-White Palace must be settled today. It's better that you don't get involved. No matter how it's settled, when it's over, you help your brother bear the burden. If he survived, he would continue to be brothers. If he died, he would help bury the body. Retrograde Leaf said, Do you want me to stand here and watch you get killed? There was a group of disciples behind Hongye. He had trained these disciples very well. They were all very outstanding. However, at this moment, they were still too inexperienced in the face of the powerful Black-White Palace. Red Leaf hated the fact that the heavens couldn't give him a little more time. In 1,000 years, no, in 800 years, perhaps a celestial king would appear. Because there were already 3 great celestial immortals among them, he felt that there was a chance. Unfortunately, the enemy would not give him so much time. When Jiang Xiu approached Hongye Villa, he saw more than 10 disciples of Hongye Villa rushing towards the villa from the other side. They must have been training outside and rushed over when they heard that the villa was in trouble. Jiang Xiu recognized the disciple in the lead. However, this kind of disciple, unless they were very outstanding, it was very difficult for Zhang Luoxia to remember their names. He only recognized their faces. "Who are you?" Sensing that Jiang Xiu was in trouble at the villa, he was naturally very vigilant. Jiang Xiu, a friend of retrograde Leaf from the Bitter Realm. The other party did not recognize him. It was no wonder. His current appearance was very different from before. However, if he said that he was Zhang Luoxia, the other party would definitely not believe him. It might even lead to bad consequences. It was more appropriate to say that he was a friend of retrograde Leaf. "So you are a friend of the Master of the Bitter Realm. Sorry for being rude. Lord, are you also here to help Hongye?" He was Hongye's 7th disciple. He could not remember his name, but he remembered the order of the disciples. "7th senior brother, why are you still talking nonsense with him? Let's hurry back. It's too late." The junior brother beside him urged anxiously. 7th senior brother said, "Lord, we will leave first." After saying that, he was about to rush back. Jiang Xiu said, "Wait, what's wrong with Hongye Villa?" 7th senior brother said, "I really don't have time to explain it to you. You will know when we get there. If Lord is afraid of Black-White Palace, you don't have to come. Hongye Villa will not blame you. After all, not everyone dares to offend Black-White Palace. Let's go." After that, he no longer paid any attention to Jiang Xiu, and the group quickly rushed to the villa. Black-White Palace. Jiang Xiu thought for a while. He seemed to have heard Hongye mention that his previous sect was destroyed by Black-White Palace. Now, they were here to crusade against Hongye. "Wait," Jiang Xiu said, but the other party did not stop. He could only shake his head helplessly and catch up with them in a flash. "Do you want me to give you a ride?" 7th senior brother and his junior brothers looked at each other and suddenly felt suspicious. Jiang Xiu was too strange. He said that he was here to help, but he was not in a hurry when the fight started. They thought that Jiang Xiu did not dare to interfere and let him go, but he chased after them. They all suspected that Jiang Xiu was here to help. Maybe he was from Black-White Palace. "You want to bring us? I think you have bad intentions." Jiang Xiu laughed. "You are Hongye's 7th disciple. Don't you recognize me?" You are?" Actually, 7th senior brother did find Jiang Xiu familiar when he saw him. But people were similar. His memory had always been very good. Naturally, he thought that he was similar to someone he knew. "I am an old friend of your master. I often come to stay in the villa in autumn when the maple leaves are falling." 7th senior brother stared at Jiang Xiu. Suddenly, his eyes showed a very shocked expression. Then he said, "No, it's impossible. I heard from Master that sect leader Jiang has passed away. Senior brothers, this is a thief. Take him down." The sudden change surprised Jiang Xiu. He immediately shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Who said that I am dead? In this world, the person who can kill me has not been born yet. Kill him. This person must be from the Black-White Palace. He dares to pretend to be sect leader Jiang. He must want to plot against Master." 7th senior brother was very alert. He even thought of Jiang Xiu's plan. Jiang Xiu could only smile bitterly and shake his head. He was too nervous. Looking at those people rushing over, Jiang Xiu raised his hand. A strong wind swept out. These people were blown away by the strong wind. 7th senior brother never thought that the wind could be so strong. In a burst of screams, these people flew back to the villa. In the next moment, they had covered hundreds of miles in the blink of an eye. Within the sect that was filled with murderous intent, Screams rang out one after another. These people fell to the ground one by one, howling in pain. Seventh senior brother. Hongyi was taken aback. What's going on? Why are you back? Seventh senior brother got up and said with gritted teeth, I heard that the villa was in danger, so I rushed over. Unexpectedly, I met people from the Black-White Palace on the way and was plotted against. Yes. It's good that you came back. Stand at the back. Black Ghost laughed. I thought it was someone extraordinary. It turns out that you are the remnants of Hongya Villa. It's good that you came back. You don't have to be like the remnants of the past. But, it's really ugly. Fell from the sky. Ha ha ha. Hongya's face was a little ugly. Tell me what happened. How did the people from the Black-White Palace plot against you? We met a person on the way. He first claimed to be a friend of the Master of Bitter Situation. Then he claimed to be the late sect leader of Chenqing School, Jiang Luoxia. He also attacked us. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.